FPS Win. Written by
嘟嘟雪球
Chapter 346. After obtaining all the necessary information, Chen Chen directly handed Luffy over to the police. He could guess what would happen to Luffy. For an ordinary person like him who had no power and was involved in JD activities, his end would generally be quite miserable. His imprisonment will inevitably leave his wife and children isolated and helpless. Whether these people can survive is one thing. And even if they survive, whether they can grow up to be normal people who meet universal moral standards is another thing. However, Chen Chen didn't care about it and didn't have any psychological burden. Nonsense. After all, he is just a mercenary. Mercenaries don't consider the future, especially a future that has nothing to do with their own interests. Do not meddle in other people's affairs if you are not in their position. This is the most basic and bottom-line principle. Stretching too far does no one any good. Therefore, from the moment the explosives were discovered, Luffy's fate was actually doomed. Chen Chen had already prepared himself mentally, and his emotions did not fluctuate at all. However, when he saw the evidence he left behind and the good citizen medal that was already covered with stains, Chen Chen couldn't help but feel a little emotional. Not all worlds are cannibalistic, but if you want to change a cannibalistic world into a non-cannibalistic one, it really requires unparalleled strength throughout the ages. He shook his head and sealed all the evidence into a cardboard box. At this time, other members of the Dongfeng Corps had also arrived at the meeting room. After a simple tidying up, Chen Chen began to brief all the personnel. Based on the information we got from Luffy, we can basically sort out the intelligence that was previously like a fog. There are three key pieces of intelligence. First, the US is not only connected to SAS, JIS, and EM, but also to ISK. By manipulating the activities of these three organizations in Indonesia, they want to achieve some kind of change of the tide. The departments involved are likely to include the CIA, SAD, DSS, etc. The background is quite complicated. But what is certain is that most of these departments are not involved in direct military operations. When it comes to equipment delivery and technology delivery, they basically use the consulting service departments under MPRI as agents. We can find some clues about this from Luffy's confession. Although the people who provided him with technology were masked, they subconsciously used a lot of special English words. For example, they call the single-pole, single-throw Mercury switch a mailbag switch. This is very typical because Mercury switches are often used in mailbag bombs. This name also came from the frontline team of the Americans. So, the identity of our opponent can be said to have been made clear once again. MPRI. We may have our first direct collision with them in the near future. Having said that, Chen Chen paused for a moment, and after confirming that everyone had no questions about it, he continued. Secondly, Luffy did not receive training point-to-point, but received unified training at the Darul Jihad Mosque in Laboda. We still underestimated the role of this mosque in JD activities. Later, we can inform the police and put more investigative efforts on this mosque. Third, Luffy confirmed that they will still organize new training after we destroy the Darul Jihad Mosque, and the next training will be held the day after tomorrow in Losoni, but the specific location will be known after arriving in Losoni. So, our plan is very clear, which is to find a way to sneak in, get more clues, and find an opportunity to find the physical organization deployed by MPRI in Sulawesi and catch it in one fell swoop. As long as we solve the problem of MPRI's physical organization in Sulawesi, Qingshan Group will be basically safe. We don't need to stay in Indonesia and can do other things. Next, we need to discuss a specific action plan. My idea is that we should still focus on infiltration operations, but of course, considering the possibility of a head-on conflict with MPRI, we must be fully prepared. Chen Chen introduced the situation bit by bit, and the discussion on the battle plan lasted for a full 4 hours, which made Lin Chenming, who was attending as a special guest for the first time, confused. The rules of procedure and organizational form are not just similar, they are exactly the same. In addition, the discussion process involves a clash of opinions, with one party often criticizing and the other making improvements, and at the same time summarizing the lessons learned from the previous task. This way, the content of the meeting became more rich. My goodness, you call this a pre-war discussion meeting? Isn't this just a party group life meeting? After the meeting, Lin Chenming has completely integrated into the group. Although he is still nominally under the relationship with Qingshan Group, he has already felt that sooner or later, he will have to be the person from Dongfeng Group. After the discussion, Chen Chen also began to prepare a specific implementation plan. There is no doubt that he still has to report to Xiaoyu in advance. After all, she had clearly warned herself before that she was not allowed to do anything at will, but the situation now was one that could not be missed and had to be dealt with. So she had to do something special, report it in advance, and let her side prepare. Advertisement Chen Chen called Xiaoyu, who sounded a little tired. Chen Chen asked, "What's wrong with you? You sound weak. Are you tired?" The little fish sighed and replied, "It's you who did it." When the huge landmine of Bashir was uncovered, the entire Indonesian upper class went crazy. He can't even be considered a landmine. He is simply a political nuclear bomb. Yusilo is ready to launch a massive cleanup, and now everyone is busy lining up. And the most ridiculous thing is that he just returned to Jakarta from BJ this month, and then Bashir was arrested. There are all kinds of rumors, and this is the most troublesome part. Forget it, let's not talk about this. Why did you come to me? What are you saying? Can I find you if nothing happens? Yes, but you'd better be serious now. I don't have time to waste these few days. After hearing Xiaoyu's words, Chen Chen also put away his teasing attitude and said directly, "We found clues about MPRI and are going to arrest them. If there is an opportunity, I hope to use this operation to find out the MPRI entities in Sulawesi and eliminate them all at once." "How did you find it?" "We caught an ISK guy." "ISK? Are you sure?" "If you were sure, then Su Silo may be in danger." Xiaoyu's tone was surprised, yet mixed with a hint of worry. She was more familiar with ISK's background than Chen Chen, so when Chen Chen mentioned the name, she almost instantly understood everything Chen Chen already knew. This is the most basic acumen of an intelligence officer. It is basically certain, at least based on the current information, that this thing is definitely not JIS or EIM. but we'll have to go and see tomorrow to find out the specific situation. Xiaoyu on the other end of the phone was silent for a few seconds, and then she replied after seeming to get confirmation. No problem, you can go. But try not to make too much noise, otherwise it will end badly. Then I'm calling you to tell you that we might be making a big move. What are you going to do? Xiaoyu asked warily. I don't have enough equipment, and the route hasn't been opened yet. I want to make some equipment myself. Are you going to make a bomb again? Not this time. Non-lethal weapons. Be more specific and explain it clearly. Chen Chen hesitated for a moment, then replied, cluster blast tear gas. What the hell? Say that again. Cluster blast tear gas is an old thing, not a new thing. Xiaoyu on the other end of the phone was silent, and Chen Chen did not urge her. After half a minute, she finally said, wait for my news first. I know roughly what you want. If that doesn't work, I'll get you a box of 602 and you can modify it yourself. 602 that Xiaoyu mentioned is of course not the C-602 missile, nor the N-602 Tsar bomb. In fact, she is referring to a rather uncommon type of tear gas bomb. 48mm 602 explosive tear gas. This thing is an explosive tear gas grenade, filled with CN tear gas. It can spread the tear gas to a range of about 15 meters in radius through explosion and is accompanied by a loud noise of about 150 decibels. Theoretically, it can also be used as a stun grenade in a confined space. This thing is basically the same idea as the tear gas grenade that Chen Chen wanted to make. It is a non-lethal weapon with multiple functions. Of course, due to the limitations of the overall environment in the North, this type of grenade does not have much use. After all, the North is not the free America, and it cannot do the cruel job of dropping 400,000 stun grenades a year. Therefore, although this grenade has many serious problems in actual combat, such as severe environmental pollution, slow diffusion of aerosol clouds, high residual tear gas vapor that is harmful to the human body, etc., it has never been seriously improved, but has been shelved as unusable inventory. In Chen Chen's memory, when they first joined the special warfare, they used this type of grenade for stun grenade resistance training. The most uncomfortable thing about it is not the loud noise, not the instantaneous intense burning sensation, nor the feeling of suffocation after the tear gas vapor enters the lungs, but the constant pain caused by the tear gas vapor that cannot be removed from your body no matter what method you use. If this description is not intuitive enough, it is probably an upgraded version of taking a bath with chili peppers. Generally speaking, this thing does meet Chen Chen's requirements, but there is also a problem. The decibels of noise generated by the explosive tear gas are still too small. Although the difference between 150 decibels and 170 decibels is only 20, the increase from 150 to 170 is not linear. To describe it intuitively, the auditory response caused by the latter is about twice that of the former. Therefore, it is okay to use 150 decibels of noise to confuse ordinary people for a short time, but if you want to make trained professionals incapacitated, it is still a bit far. It is precisely because of this that Chen Chen is more inclined to make his own cluster shock tear gas. After all, it is still unclear whether the things you make are useful, but you have the final say on how much medicine to put in and what to put in. There is absolutely no need to worry about reliability. So, although Chen Chen did not reject Xiaoyu's kindness, he also firmly stated that he still wanted to give it a try. Xiaoyu did not stop them too much. It was just a few stun grenades. What could they do? Didn't they turn a blind eye when they were making jet trains and thermite bombs? After getting Xiaoyu's authorization, Chen Chen hung up the phone with satisfaction. Then he opened the chair on his desk and began to sort out the various materials needed to make stun gas. This thing is carried out in two parts. The first part is the stun grenade, and the second part is the tear gas. The main ingredients of the former are ammonium nitrate, magnesium powder, and potassium perchlorate. It is not difficult to obtain these things. In the modern society, with a basic industrial foundation, it can be said that making a stun grenade is much easier than making a firework. Buy all the materials, mix them in a mineral water bottle, add a fuse, light it, and throw it out. This is the simplest stun grenade. If the explosion effect is not ideal, then find a way to adjust the material ratio and throw some PP powder in to act as an oxidizer to intensify the reaction. All in all, this is really a fun chemistry experiment that children can play at home by themselves. However, tear gas is more complicated than stun grenades. The popular tear gas in the world now are basically CN, CS, CR, or OC, among which OC is excluded first, because capsaicin is generally only suitable for making water-based or oily solvents and used by spraying. It can be used to make an anti-wolf spray, but it cannot form a continuous aerosol cloud if it is made into an explosive tear gas bomb. The action time is extremely short. In the best case, it may only incapacitate people for 2 to 3 minutes and cannot achieve the necessary control effect. The synthesis steps of CS and CR are extremely complicated. Without the support of a complete chemical industry, it is very difficult to produce them by yourself. The best option is to try to synthesize CN tear gas. The raw materials for the synthesis of this thing include hydrochloric acid, M-aminoacetophenone, acetic acid, and certain catalysts. Although the process is complicated, Qingshan Park, as a mining industrial park, has a special chemical laboratory, so it is not difficult to make some of this stuff. Even the most complicated synthesis of M-aminoacetophenone actually only requires an intermittent reactor. If they can't even handle this, then there's no need for Qingshan Group to mine here. They should change their business as soon as possible. After spending half an hour, Chen Chen basically sorted out the raw materials he needed. He wrote all the raw materials on paper, then called Zhang Yang to his office and handed him the list. Mr. Zhang, take a look at this list. There are some things on it that I need your help to purchase. They are basically some chemicals that are not regulated. Can you help me see if you can gather them together today? If La Boda doesn't have it, Kandari will definitely be able to buy it all. Then we need to do some synthesis work, and we may have to borrow your chemistry laboratory. Ah, Boss Chen, you even know this? Zhang Yang asked in surprise, then looked at the list in his hand. Methaminoacetophenone, hydrochloric acid diazotization reaction, right? CuCl? Samire reaction? I see. You want to make M-chloroacetophenone? Tear gas. That's right. Chen Chen nodded calmly, and he had no intention of hiding it from Zhang Yang. I understand, but why bother? Can't you just go and buy it? Go buy it directly? Where to buy it? Chen Chen looked at Zhang Yang in astonishment and asked. In fact, although he remembered the raw materials and the synthesis methods, he did not really know much about chemistry. He basically just memorized some routines by rote. Therefore, he only knew roughly where this thing came from, but didn't know how to obtain it most efficiently. Zhang Yang on the opposite side was obviously different. He saw what Chen Chen wanted to do at a glance, which showed that he had considerable background in chemistry and chemical engineering, which was completely different from a peasant like Chen Chen. Looking at Chen Chen's expression, Zhang Yang paused and replied, in terms of industry, Sulawesi is not good at anything else, but it is good at making pesticides. After all, there are really many mosquitoes here. Metachloroacetophenone is an important intermediate raw material for synthesizing pesticides. Not to mention Kandari, even La Boda, I think there are small workshops with stocks. How about it? How much do you want? I'll try to get you the goods tonight. The more the better. Chen Chen opened his mouth to answer. He never expected that what seemed difficult to him could be solved with just a few simple words from Zhang Yang's perspective. This is probably the power of resources. Of course, this is also why I had to leave Pubay and come to Indonesia. Only by finding ways to establish my own relationships and accumulate my own resources through various means will Dongfeng Group have the possibility of further growth. Otherwise, are we really going to fight wars for the rest of our lives? It's impossible that the general will die soon. If you walk by the river often, how can you not get your shoes wet? If possible, Chen Chen still hopes to turn to Zhang Yang behind the scenes. The time for ordering the goods was quickly finalized. From M-chloroacetophenone to CN tear gas, there are still a few processing steps, but this is not difficult for the laboratory in Qingshan Park at all. Chen Chen simply gave it to him to deal with the problem of charging. The next thing Chen Chen had to solve was the problem of the launcher. Chen Chen's goal was not to make a single stun gas grenade, nor a multi-barrel launcher, but a proper cluster launcher. Because his goal is very simple, which is to achieve complete suppression of an entire area through a single launch, not giving those possible JD elements any time to react. So in this case, the design of the launcher is quite sophisticated. Considering the technical maturity, Chen Chen still chose the simplest sewer pipe as the barrel. But this time, he did not use a gas tank to make a bomb. Instead, he used heat processing technology to make a fully plastic shell and filled the shell with black gunpowder he prepared. Advertisement in essence, this thing is a super large firework. After the gunpowder inside explodes, the kinetic energy is used to shatter the all-plastic outer shell. And then the sub-explosive with exposed internal fuse is ignited and scattered to form a wide-area explosion. In order to reduce the number of processing steps, he used a very clever material as a container for the sub-explosives, an aluminum Coke can. You don't even need to cut it. Just put gunpowder into a Coke can and remove the fuse from some fireworks. One person can make a bomblet in 30 seconds. Next, fill the sub-bombs into the mother bomb shell in a relatively tight arrangement, close the lid, and everything is ready. After spending a day, Chen had completed the prototype. Standing on the open space of the mine behind the park, looking at the extremely simple structure of the gun mount in front of him, Zhang Yang, who participated in the whole process, couldn't help but take a breath. He looked at Bao Qi, who was about to light the fire, then looked at Chen Chen, who was standing beside him confidently, and asked with some concern, "Are you sure this thing is not dangerous? Won't it explode?" Chen Chen smiled and replied, "How dangerous is this? You can't even put a gas tank in there, and it won't explode, let alone this." Gas tank. Zhang Yang was stunned. "You haven't really done this before, have you?" "Of course we have, otherwise how would we know how to do it?" Chen Chen answered casually. He did not notice the change in Zhang Yang's expression. But in fact, not only Zhang Yang, but even Lin Chenming, who was originally very interested, was a little dumbfounded at this moment. In their perception, gas tank bombs have always been exclusive to the Middle East. They could never have imagined that this well-equipped Dongfeng Corps could actually make such a thing and be so adaptable. Just highlight the idea of accepting all comers and using them first, right? While they were hesitating with mixed feelings whether to persuade Chen Chen to pay attention to safety, all the preparations were already complete. After the propellant was loaded and the shell was loaded, Bao Qi looked at Chen Chen, who nodded in response. Then, without any hesitation, he lit the fuse on the shell. A few seconds later, a loud bang was heard. Bang! Boom! Bang, 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 bang. The mother bomb flew to a height of more than 10 meters, drew a parabola forward and exploded in midair. Under the thrust of the expanding gunpowder, the bullets inside were thrown away and scattered within a radius of nearly 50 meters. Then, the bullets with ignited fuses fell to the ground and exploded, some even exploded directly in the air. Since this was only the first experiment, Chen Chen did not fill the sub-bomb with tear gas and stun agents, but simply filled it with some black powder and magnesium powder as explosion indicators. At this moment, under the cover of night, the open space next to the mine exploded into a sea of fire, and the whole scene was extremely shocking. Fuck! Lin Chenming, who was watching, couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. This thing actually works? Chen Chen nodded slightly and replied, "In fact, the principle of cluster bombs is not complicated at all. Most fireworks are designed with cluster bombs. It is not surprising that they can be made. But there's a problem with our charge. The range is too small, and the bomblets are too densely distributed. In this way, on the one hand, the power is excessive in a small area, and the noise accumulation may cause irreversible consequences. On the other hand, the attack surface is not enough to form a sufficient deterrent effect. It still needs further adjustments. It would be best to replace the shell of the bomb with plastic material to increase its strength and reduce its size, so that it can withstand greater explosive impact. But this kind of adjustment is much more complicated, so let's take our time with it later. For now, this is enough." "That's enough," Lin Chenming said with admiration. "Okay, let's get started with the actual production. The tear gas is basically in place. We need to make at least 2 shells tomorrow to deal with the action the day after tomorrow. Let's go back." Hearing Chen Chen's words, several people from the Dongfeng Corps immediately dismantled the simple artillery mount and returned. And at this time, Chen Chen's cell phone suddenly rang. He picked up the phone, and it was Argus on the other end. The other party's tone was a little hurried, and he asked, "Chen, what are you doing?" "We are testing a new non-lethal weapon, cluster blast tear gas." "Cluster blast munitions? You mean submunitions? Non-lethal weapons?" "Yes, a weapon for riot control." "But I saw the explosion. Your bombs covered an area of at least 100 meters." "Yes, but still non-lethal. I can guarantee that." After hearing Chen Chen's words, Argus on the opposite side fell silent. After a few seconds, he suddenly said, "Chen, how much? Take my money and give me your bomb." The problem of cluster blast tear gas was solved, and Chen Chen also began to arrange close reconnaissance of the designated location. According to Lufti's previous instructions, the next ISK training will be organized in Losoni, a small town in the north of La Boda, but they will adopt a special review mechanism. Only those who have passed the preliminary certification will arrive in Losoni and confirm their identity with the relevant contact personnel. Only then will the contact personnel provide the specific meeting place. The time they provided the meeting place was 1 hour before the training officially started. At the same time, the person in charge of the contact is only responsible for the contact and identity verification. He is most likely not a member of the ISK core layer and does not understand the specific plans of ISK. Even if he is caught, it is impossible to touch the main members of ISK. On the contrary, if he did not provide timely feedback, the entire rally would be cancelled and people would be evacuated quickly to avoid possible risks. It can be said that this mechanism has taken security to the extreme. It is so safe that even if the Dongfeng Corps has completely broken through Lufti's psychological defenses and obtained the most specific and detailed intelligence, they are still unable to do anything to them to a large extent. It is precisely because of this situation that Chen Chen does not have 100% confidence in the specific actions of this rally. He could only execute according to the predetermined plan, taking one step at a time. If he could catch him, that would be the best, but if not, he would try other means. Losoni is a small town with a total population of only about 1,000 people, all of whom are located along the ring road around the island. Now, the total number of police officers in La Boda has reached nearly 300. They are still investigating the so-called La Porta riot case, but in reality the progress is slow. Most police officers are not serious about it and are just slacking off every day. The reason is simple. Because of a bigger incident in Kendari and the escalating conflict between the president and the military, attention to the La Boda riots has declined significantly. In the absence of constraints, it would be strange if they could work seriously. Maybe in a few days, Ganawan will transfer these people back to Kendari. In this case, why not transfer them to Losoni and let them do something that can actually produce results? This will be better for everyone. At worst, Chen Chen can just pay some money and then ask Xiaoyu to reimburse him. $1,000 per person. Chen Chen didn't believe they wouldn't do it. $300,000 is a lot of money for the Indonesian police, but for Xiaoyu and his team, let alone destroying part of ISK's forces, even just getting their intelligence is absolutely worthwhile. Thinking of this, Chen Chen also relaxed. Now that there is a guaranteed solution, just go for it. The next morning, all 12 members of the Dongfeng Corps had gathered, their equipment was ready, and the medical vehicle needed by Ping Chuan was also ready to go. This is a very prudent consideration. The Dongfeng Corps may collide head-on with the MPRI, and in the event of a high probability of conflict, it must be prepared for injuries and casualties. However, considering that Ping Chuan's medical vehicle was too conspicuous, Chen Chen did not let him move with the main force. Instead, he arranged for him to wait in Krino, another town 2 kilometers away from Losoni, ready to respond at any time. Once there is a trend of conflict, Ping Chuan can reach the scene within 3 minutes. According to Chen Chen's estimation, no matter how intense the upcoming conflict is, they can basically delay it for 3 minutes before opening fire. By that time, Ping Chuan should be able to complete preparations and join the battle. Everything was ready. At 7 a.m., Group 1 of the Dongfeng Corps set out first, dressed in plain clothes and without carrying heavy equipment, to Losoni to organize preliminary reconnaissance. There were 5 big men sitting in an inconspicuous Toyota sedan. The trunk was filled with guns and ammunition, and weapons that could kill were placed everywhere in the car within reach. But the 4 men's attire was indeed as ordinary as that of all ordinary people in this land. We will split up once we reach Losoni. According to the plan, Bao Qi will look for possible meeting places. Shi Dakai will keep an eye on the meeting point, and Li Bang, Lin He and I will follow the meeting person. Be careful not to draw attention, be casual, and don't wait until you realize you're in danger of being discovered before disengaging. Pay attention to your surroundings, and if you notice any significant changes in the environment, adjust your strategy accordingly. Use the radio carefully, and especially don't touch the earphones with your hands, understand? Clear, clear. Everyone answered in turn, and at this time, the car had already arrived in Losoni City. According to the predetermined strategy, Bao Qi first surveyed several key potential targets in the city, including mosques, schools, and larger residential houses. He visited each of them to determine whether the conditions for organizing a rally were met or whether preparations for the rally had already been made. The other 4 people except him walked to the meeting point, an abandoned public volleyball court in the northeast corner of Losoni. There were few residents around. Theoretically, no one would go to this area. As long as Chen Chen and his 4 companions appeared there, it would be an obvious alarm signal. Fortunately, the other party's arrangement was not without flaws. The biggest problem is that there is no one on the volleyball court, and there is no one on the way to the volleyball court. There is only one way to get here, and there happens to be a tourist attraction on the side of the road, the Lamono Mata Water Cave. This place is where locals often go to cool off. Chen Chen and 3 others arrived early, and like all the other tourists, they took off their clothes, soaked in the water, and waited quietly. They even placed beer and picnic food on the shore, and at first glance, they seemed to have completely blended in with the crowd of people resting here. It was just 9 o'clock at this time. Although it was still early, the water temperature had gradually risen. The 4 of them chatted while observing the people passing by. After more than 2 hours, they finally locked on the first suspicious target. He was a local man who was in a hurry. Both his movements and expressions showed that he was a little nervous. After passing the river, less than 10 minutes later, he hurried back. There's something wrong with this person. Chen Chen immediately made a judgment, and then continued. Lin He, follow him and report the situation at any time. Pay attention to the tracking principles and don't expose yourself. Clear. Lin He immediately stood up and put on his clothes, then quickly ran through the woods, went around the woods to the front of the target, and waited leisurely for the target to come from a distance. I've got it. The target is heading north. The purpose is unknown. We can't confirm whether it is an ISK member for the time being. We will continue to observe. Understood. Continue observing. Report your location. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Chen Chen stood up, stretched lazily pretending to be tired, then dried his body and put on his clothes. Advertisement tracking and stalking is a complex and systematic task that cannot be accomplished by one person, as most people think. Each of the techniques and steps of disguise, anti-tracking, information transmission, connection, and relay is enough to write a book. However, if one is not careful during the execution, one's tracking intention will be exposed, causing the entire mission to collapse. To use a vivid example, a tracking and surveillance is like carving with a chisel on a precious piece of porcelain that cannot be restored. If one stroke is wrong, the whole piece of porcelain will be scrapped. The difficulty is very high. So Chen Chen abandoned the traditional training method and directly followed the usual thinking and implemented a short, flat, and fast special strategy. According to the plan, after Lin He completes the first stage of identity confirmation, Chen Chen will follow up to fill in. After taking over Lin He's position, he will have time to disguise himself again and use the variability of disguise to reduce the risk of exposure. In this way, the role of the originally complex judgment that mainly relies on experience will be weakened, and the difficulty of the entire tracking task will be reduced. Following Lin He's guidance, Chen Chen quickly walked towards the ring road around the island. This was the only street in the entire Losoni. In fact, apart from here, there was nowhere else for the target to go. A few minutes later, Chen Chen saw Lin He squatting on the street eating pancakes. Lin He looked straight ahead, concentrating on watching two locals who were arguing in the distance. He seemed very interested, but a closer look revealed that he would glance to the left from time to time to confirm the location of his target. Chen Chen walked past him, and he coughed lightly, indicating to Chen Chen that he was ready to take off his hair. After receiving his instruction, Chen Chen did not respond verbally, but just raised his left hand and made a hair-grabbing gesture. This was a necessary code word for transmitting information during the tracking process. After Lin He received the response, he immediately stood up and left the target area. In an empty corner, he sent a signal to Li Bang who was ready, and Li Bang took over the next step of tracking backup work. By following this routine, the three of them can complete the smooth rotation of personnel and ensure that there is no complete loss of command. At the same time, Chen Chen had already bitten on the target. The target found a street pancake stand and sat down, looking around cautiously. This did not reflect his professionalism, but rather exposed his amateurishness. Because acting naturally is the first thing all intelligence workers need to learn, and preventing themselves from having the illusion that everyone knows what I'm doing is a test that they must pass. Obviously, the goal at hand does not have such professionalism. Not only did he fail to notice Chen Chen, who was standing across the street buying cigarettes and concentratedly counting money, but his actions and expressions completely exposed his suspicious intentions. By now, Chen Chen can basically confirm that this person is related to ISK. He is most likely a peripheral member like Lufti. Perhaps he has received education from ISK through some channel before, but this is his first time participating in a group activity, so he appears so nervous and even excited. Chen Chen unpacked the cigarette he had just bought, lit it and took 2 puffs, then looked at the cigarette but in his hand in a puzzled manner, and turned to the cigarette seller. Of course, he was not going to argue with the boss. Not doing anything that attracts attention is the bottom line that a stalker must abide by. Many beginners will try to create a credible identity for themselves by using all kinds of strange behaviors, but in fact doing so will have the opposite effect. The only right choice is to blend into the crowd as much as possible. Chen Chen's actions were just to create as much opportunity for himself to stay longer as possible. He took out money from his pocket and handed it to the boss, then chose a different pack of cigarettes. Meanwhile, the target finally got his scone and ate it by the roadside like everyone else. He was still looking around vigilantly. Chen Chen walked straight towards him and looked at his waist. This is also a little trick. As long as the stalker does not make eye contact with the person being stalked, it is basically impossible to be remembered. Chen Chen brushed past him, then continued walking forward. After turning the corner, he sat down in front of the only coffee shop in Losoni. He ordered himself a cup of coffee and asked his boss where the bathroom was. Then, before the coffee was served, he went into the bathroom and completed the handover with Li Bang, who had arrived. The latter walked hurriedly to the stall selling scones, asked for a scone in front of the target, ate it hurriedly, and then returned along the same path. At this time, Chen Chen had already sat down at the table in front of the coffee shop, drinking coffee and leisurely looking at the passersby. Most of the residents of Losoni are parasitic on the pillar industry of transportation. Of course, this does not mean that they make a living from transportation. There are often only 2 ways for the poor to make a living: add water to the passing trucks and wash them, and provide various services to the truck drivers. Occasionally, scantily clad women who definitely shouldn't be here would walk by on the street. Whenever they walked by, everyone's attention would be attracted, and Chen Chen would use this time window to quickly observe the target. Soon, the target also finished eating the scones. But he did not leave immediately, but stood there in confusion. It was clear that there was still some time before the rally started, and he would not be able to go to the rally before a certain time. It seems that the entire process of today's tracking mission is destined to be prolonged. This thought flashed through Chen Chen's mind, and at this moment, the target suddenly moved. Chen Chen ignored him and rubbed his face gently with his hands clasped together. Lin He, who had already changed his clothes, immediately received his instructions, took his place, and continued to follow the man moving forward. Chen Chen slowly finished the coffee in the cup, and Li Bang rotated to position number 2, alternating with Lin He to follow. They had moved to Nimbo village, the northernmost part of Losoni. Li Bang and Lin He had no room to maneuver and could only continue forward and pass the tracking target. Chen Chen, who had caught up with them, took their place and turned to the small supermarket on the east side of the Ring Island Highway. He walked into the supermarket and observed his target standing in front of the mosque through the gaps between the supermarket shelves. The target stayed here for 2 minutes, but instead of entering the mosque, he turned around and left to the south. Chen Chen let out a long sigh and said into the radio, "We can basically determine the location. Near the Bright Faith Mosque in Numbo village. It's a bit troublesome. It doesn't seem to be technical guidance this time, otherwise it shouldn't be arranged in a mosque. Number 3, keep observing and see if there are any other breakthroughs." After determining that the gathering location was near the mosque, Chen Chen immediately changed his investigation strategy. Shi Dekai, who had been staying near the volleyball court for observation, was also transferred to join the surveillance operation, while Bao Qi, who had been investigating other possible gathering points, changed the focus of his observation and focused on checking whether there was any preparation that had already existed. The result is obvious. All other places are occupied to varying degrees or do not meet the conditions for gatherings. The only place that can be used is the mosque. This immediately made Chen Chen alert. Not only because the mosque was not a suitable place for technical training, but more importantly, if Isuke really chose this mosque as a gathering point, it would seem a bit too high profile. This is totally inconsistent with their usual style, and even more inconsistent with the purpose of their plan. Wasn't the purpose to secretly develop their own power, and then seize resources and power from JIS and EIM? With this going on, how can I continue to develop in a low-key manner? After evacuating back to the car, Chen Chen felt more and more that something was wrong as he listened to the information sent back by Bao Qi. But a large number of people have begun to gather at the Numbo village mosque and are entering the venue. Something is wrong. It seems their rally is brought forward. I saw white people coming in while hidden, but they were white people. It's definitely technical training. I saw someone coming in with a toolbox. The mosque has begun to be closed. There are security personnel outside. They seem to have long guns, but their identities are unknown. Number 4, do you want to take action in advance? The rally was hastily brought forward. White people were spotted entering, technical training with tools, and security personnel who were easily spotted. This is no longer high profile, but a show. Chen Chen made a prompt decision and immediately gave the order. Contact the rear. All combat teams, set off immediately. This is most likely a trap. Our actions have been exposed. We must have spies around us. They can't do such a stupid thing. We have to evacuate first. MPRI's people might be nearby. Hearing his words, everyone turned their heads subconsciously. Even the always cautious Shi Dekai asked with some doubt. Number 4, are you sure? That I don't know, but I can't underestimate our enemies. From now on, reduce the frequency of radio communications as much as possible, adopt emergency communication rules, and use code words to indicate location and time. Although we are using frequency hopping, no one can guarantee whether they have high-power equipment that can monitor frequency hopping communications. Let's go first. As he spoke, Chen Chen opened the trunk. He no longer cared about the risk of being exposed and put on all his equipment. Seeing his actions, others had no choice but to follow his orders no matter how many questions they had. After just a few minutes, everyone, including Bao Qi who had returned, was fully armed. After getting in the car, Bao Qi said, "The mosque has been completely closed. Now is the best opportunity to catch them. We can catch them all in one fell swoop. That place is too narrow. If we kill the security guards and throw 2 stun grenades inside, we can knock down everyone inside. They won't have a chance to evacuate. We just need to, etc." At this point, Bao Qi suddenly came to his senses. Yes, if the security problem in that place is so serious, how could Isuke set it as a rally venue? They are not fools. It can even be said that behind them stand a group of people with the most combat experience and the smartest tactics in the world. If that is the case, how could they make such a low-level tactical mistake? There really is a problem. Advertisement. Bao Qi looked at Chen Chen in astonishment. At this moment, he once again realized the gap between himself and Chen Chen. It's not just a gap in tactical thinking and technical level, nor a gap in experience, but a gap in unparalleled judgment and decisiveness. With just a few vague details, even before the situation in the mosque had changed, he had already discovered the possible risks and decisively chose to leave. This kind of vision is really frighteningly vicious and accurate. What now? Bao Qi didn't say anything else, but asked directly. First retreat outside Losoni and wait south of Chrono. No matter how fierce the MPRI is, they can't attack us without reason. They are more passive than us. We both have the right to legally bear arms, but at the same time we also have the right to assist law enforcement, and in this regard, we have completely suppressed them. As long as we don't take action, they will have absolutely no reason to do so. We are safe for the time being. But this time, I'm afraid it won't be easy to catch them. Understood. Is there any chance to turn the tables? Bao Qi nodded and continued to ask. We have to find them first. It's not easy since the enemy is in the dark and we are in the light. Not all actions will be successful. Don't force it. Clear. The Toyota sedan started and drove out of the city without any hesitation. At this time, on the roof of a house not far from the mosque, 2 white men were holding binoculars and shaking their heads with some regret. How on earth did they find out? I thought we had it perfect. The intelligence was well prepared, the plan was complete, and the disguise was very good. We even monitored their every move, starting from the moment they left the Qingshan campus. They are completely passive like prey that have walked into a trap. But at the last second, they turn around and run away. How is this possible? The bait they want to swallow is right in front of them, and there is no danger around. I can't imagine how their commander made this judgment, but it's really amazing. Originally, we could have killed them all with a simple bomb if they had entered the mosque, but now, things have become complicated. How about it? Do you want to just do it? Hearing his words, the man opposite nodded slightly and replied, "We can't keep this person. They have already caused us huge losses in Pubay, and now they are even trying to interfere in Indonesia's affairs. If he continues to exist, our plan might really fail. Just do it." This is a necessary risk that we have to take. Notify everyone and prepare for battle. They will definitely evacuate to Chrono. We must kill them before their support arrives, and then devour their support force. Clear. The battle plan was quickly finalized, and then the radio waves transmitted one cold instruction after another to the ears of all the lurking hunters. They poked their heads out from the woods and swamps, raising their weapons to reap lives. The prey that their guns were aimed at was retreating quickly and calmly. It's too late. Near Chrono, Chen Chen patted the shoulder of Lin He, who was in the driver's seat. The latter braked and stopped immediately, then asked in confusion, "What's too late?" "Evacuate. It's too late to evacuate." Chen Chen's face was heavy, and he continued, "I found a blind spot. If the other party really set up this rally as a trap, it means they must have invested a huge cost. If the mission fails, they will inevitably suffer unnecessary losses, and if they want to make up for this loss, their best way is to kill us at all costs." Dakai took over Chen Chen's words and continued. Chen Chen nodded and continued to analyze. This is not impossible. They have a large number of people and can definitely sacrifice a large number of them to exchange with us. Whether these people die, get hurt, or have to leave afterwards, they can bear it and it will not shake their roots in Indonesia. If we didn't create enough motivation for them before, then after the Bashir incident, it must be enough. We'd better not leave Chrono. The crowd is our cover. The support must also be withdrawn. They may be attacked on the way, and we don't have the manpower to make trial and error. But that's a slow death. Dakai interrupted Chen Chen and said with a frown, "Holding on to Chrono can buy us time, but it can only delay the conflict, not completely eliminate it. We need police protection. We need official intervention. We should contact Argus immediately and ask him to transfer people over. Bao Qi, go contact them." Chen Chen answered decisively, and then continued to say to Lin He, "Drive to the Chrono Rugby Stadium. There are civilian activities there, so we can be safe for the time being. Dakai, contact Zhang Yang and ask him to prepare the seaplane. If necessary, we will evacuate by water. Li Bang, check your equipment and get ready for battle." Clear. Everyone took action immediately. Lin He stepped on the accelerator and drove the car towards the Chrono Rugby Stadium and rushed directly into the parking lot outside the stadium. At this time, a not-so-formal game was going on in the stadium, so Chen Chen got out of the car immediately. As expected, their attire attracted everyone's attention. The police officer who happened to be standing in the distance watching also came over, reached for the pistol at his waist, and approached the 5 people vigilantly. Chen Chen took out the ID he had prepared long ago and showed it to show their identities. The police officer breathed a sigh of relief and asked, "Who are you?" He was speaking Indonesian, and Chen Chen could only understand fragments of what he said. So he simply did not answer and just stuffed the ID in his hand into the other person's hand and let him take a look. This certificate was specially approved by the Kendari police station. Although the form was completely different from the ordinary police officer certificate, the stamp and anti-counterfeiting mark on it were indeed genuine. After checking and finding no loopholes, the police officer finally relaxed completely. So Chen Chen continued to speak a few words in simple Indonesian. "Safety, us, protection." The police officer nodded slightly, then waved his hand and walked towards the crowd, conveying Chen Chen's meaning. The crowd quickly calmed down, perhaps not because of the police officer's explanation, but because of the equipment of the Dongfeng Corps. This thing can naturally give people a sense of security, because everyone generally believes that people who can wear this equipment are basically unlikely to be so low-end as to attack civilians. The situation was temporarily stabilized, and the Eastern Corps gained a brief respite. Bao Qi had already called Argus and explained the situation to him. Argus on the other side also realized the seriousness of the problem, and he quickly replied that he would send police to Chrono, which made Chen Chen feel a little safer. However, this sense of security did not last more than 2 minutes. 2 minutes later, Bao Qi received another call from Agus. On the phone, he told everyone an unexpected situation. An explosion had just occurred in La Boda, and the location was near the residence of Lufti, where Chen Chen and his friends had visited before. The explosion was huge, and the shockwave destroyed more than a dozen houses. The number of casualties caused by the explosion instantly exceeded 10, and Lufti's family, including 2 children, were completely killed. The situation that Labada had finally stabilized became chaotic again, and the police were forced to engage in operations to maintain order. Because there are rumors that the explosion was a retaliation for the police action, and innocent people were sacrificed. Damn, the rumor happened before the explosion. What kind of deliberate conspiracy is this? Obviously, the 2 sides have not officially met yet, but the game of chess has already begun. The police can't come, at least not in the short term. I'm afraid we can no longer use civilians as cover. They are more determined than we expected. We need to find a place to hold on and wait for help. Bao Qi, is there any suitable shelter nearby? No, Bao Qi answered without hesitation. At this time, he had already raised the drone, and the surrounding environment was clearly visible. There is no solid shelter in the whole Chrono. Most of the houses here are ordinary brick and wood structures. Not to mention the possible RPG, they may not even be able to withstand armor-piercing bullets. Blindly hiding in is not to find a shelter for yourself, but to find a coffin for yourself. How about going on the water? We are very close to the sea. We can find a fishing boat to go out to sea. Lenny asked. The fishing boats are too slow and are pure targets. Dakai immediately denied it, and then said, we can only go into the woods. They may not be able to defeat us in the woods. Okay, pack up your equipment and set off immediately. Chen Chen acted promptly, and a few minutes later, everyone packed up their equipment, took all the ammunition they could, and headed for the woods behind the football field. Just as they reached the edge of the woods, a bullet hit the tree next to Chen Chen with a bang. Anti-material sniper rifle. Fortunately, the other party also fired in a hurry, and this shot missed the target by a very small margin. Debris flew everywhere. Chen Chen fell forward subconsciously, and then shouted loudly. Number 2. Look for the enemy. Communications are being jammed. Bao Qi answered immediately. The drone had lost contact, and its radio communications were jammed, not to mention the cellular network signals that didn't exist in the dense forest. The team completely lost contact with the outside world, and at the same time, a sniper in the back seat of a pickup truck not far away uttered a regretful curse. Fuck, almost there. Let me tell you to drive faster. They're not stupid. Get out of the car, everyone, and search them out. The 5-member team continued to travel through the dense forest. Without modern means of communication, they could only rely on the most primitive tools. Advertisement with Lin He around. The 5 people's marching speed was slightly faster than the normal rainforest marching speed. It was this slight difference in speed that helped them quickly cross the sparsely vegetated area near the residential area and enter the dense forest, without being directly intercepted by the enemy at the edge of the woods. Logically speaking, after entering the jungle, the other party should quickly give up the pursuit. After all, it is too difficult to search out a team from the rainforest. But the problem is that what Chen Chen and his team entered was not a vast rainforest, but a small forest surrounded by residential areas. The horizontal and vertical distances do not exceed 300 meters, and the range of densely vegetated areas is even only 100 meters. In this situation, there is no possibility for the other side to give up because they have the advantages of mobility, number of personnel, and even vision and information advantages brought by various advanced equipment. All they needed to do was to complete the defense on the periphery, and then send 2 teams to search little by little to drive out the rat of the Dongfeng Corps. The sound of the enemy's footsteps passing through the woods could be heard from behind, and they had also entered the woods. They were not afraid of exposing their position because the visibility in the dense forest was very low, and the farthest could not exceed 30 meters. Even if the Dongfeng Corps could determine their approximate position, it would be impossible to accurately locate it through numerous obstacles. If the Dongfeng Corps wanted to launch an ambush, they had to keep the distance within 15 meters. At this distance, a gunfight is a gamble of life. Because no matter how well prepared you are, you can't guarantee that you will be lucky enough for all the other team members to appear in the shooting range at the same time, giving you the opportunity to clear the field with one shot. The pressure was raised again. Listening to the sound of branches breaking in the distance, Chen Chen's heart almost stopped beating. From the time he traveled through time until now, he had never fought such a frustrating battle. Before the fight even started, the opponent had already gained the advantage. All of our own support was locked down, all available forces were disabled, communications were cut off, reconnaissance equipment was interfered with, there were no heavy weapons, and even the number of personnel was at an absolute disadvantage. I have to say that the other party's plan is really quite sophisticated. Chen Chen didn't know whether they had been prepared for a long time, and even Lufti was deliberately released as bait, or whether they really exposed their tails by accident. But he set a trap to take advantage of the situation. But it doesn't matter anymore because I have indeed stepped into the trap. This is not because Chen Chen was not cautious enough. In fact, if he was not vigilant enough, the group of 5 would have died somewhere in Losoni. It should be said that the enemy has too much experience in this area. They have already figured out the Dongfeng Corps and the North Thoughts, so they threw out a series of baits that Chen Chen had to swallow, so that no matter how many times Chen Chen chose, he would still follow the destined path. Is this a tactic? No. This has risen to the level of strategy. They are worthy of being the regular army of MPRI. No matter how much Chen Chen hates and despises them, he has to admit that they are indeed the most powerful enemy that the Dongfeng Corps has encountered so far. Thinking of this, Chen Chen let out a long breath, and then said, "No more running. Find a puddle. We need to expand our field of vision, deploy defenses at multiple points, and expand our shooting range as much as possible. Stay alert. Number 5, climb a tree, provide vision, but don't shoot. Everyone else stand guard at the 3 corners. Do not shoot without my order. Switch the night vision device to thermal imaging mode and calibrate the temperature resolution." Clear. Everyone took action immediately, and after searching for more than 10 meters, they finally wet their bodies with the accumulated water on the ground and covered their exposed skin with mud. Immediately afterwards, the team deployed silently. Lenny climbed up the tree nimbly. Li Bang, Bao Qi, and Shi Dakai stood on guard in a triangle position, while Chen Chen himself advanced in a low posture and moved directly towards the enemy's position. He was completely disconnected from the others, more than 30 meters away. He wanted to take a gamble, betting that he could pass by the other party before the anti-infrared coating on his body lost its effect. Only in this way can we establish the firepower advantage of front and back attacks. And only in this way can we suffocate them in the jungle with fewer people against more people. And the facts proved that Chen Chen's choice was extremely correct. 2 minutes later, the MPRI members who were searching through the net missed Chen a few meters away. He didn't notice Chen lying on the ground, but Chen Chen saw him through the gaps in the leaves. The other side moved extremely slowly, which was a very typical Z-shaped reconnaissance. There was a fire team on guard about 10 meters behind him, so Chen Chen had no chance to open fire. He could only continue to wait. Then, as the other side's reconnaissance team confirmed safety, MPRI's firepower team began to advance alternately. When Chen Chen saw the equipment they were wearing, his heart almost sank. This is the regular army of MPRI. They are wearing the most advanced ISBC lightweight body armor, or more accurately, a bulletproof load-bearing platform. By 2011, less than 100,000 of this thing had been produced. Compared with the previous Interceptor, it is lighter and more functional, making it very suitable for jungle warfare. The other side was obviously well prepared, and their weapons were also carefully selected. The M249 Para paratrooper machine gun has a barrel length of less than 900 millimeters and is extremely flexible, capable of delivering unparalleled precision firepower in dense forests. The night vision goggles on their heads might be some kind of experimental model, and Chen Chen had never even seen one. One of the fire team members had a huge antenna on his back and was obviously responsible for electronic suppression. Advanced and powerful. This was Chen Chen's first impression when he saw them. As soon as this team appeared, people could not help but feel fear. Chen Chen even hesitated whether to shoot or not. It was like you were about to cross a cliff. Even if you knew that you would die if you didn't cross it, you still couldn't help but hesitate. Chen Chen blinked twice. Then he slowly moved his body and raised the 416 Hong Kong dollars in his hand. At a certain moment, the face of one of the enemies turned to Chen Chen's crosshairs, and then the trigger was pulled. Bah! The enemy's head exploded immediately, and the armor-piercing bullet penetrated the man's spine without any hindrance, and blood gushed out. Chen Chen did not hesitate and immediately turned the muzzle of his gun, pointing it at the second enemy, who had locked onto the direction of his gunshot in less than a second, and was aiming at the second enemy, who was trying to fire. Continuous gunshots rang out, and Chen Chen had already switched to full automatic mode. At this moment, he finally caught the first and possibly only mistake made by the enemy. They did not choose the wrong bulletproof vest. ISBC can block not only 416 Hong Kong dollars armor-piercing bullets, but also 7.62 by 51mm armor-piercing bullets. But the problem is that in order to achieve the goal of lightweight, the protection area of ISBC has been reduced. It was just this tiny difference that allowed Chen Chen's bullet to penetrate the enemy's flank, while the opponent's bullet hit his front bulletproof plate. Chen Chen was hit by a heavy hammer, but he managed to keep his body steady and did not fall to the ground. The third gun had locked onto his position. The gunshots had already sounded, and the opponent's first bullet was aimed at Chen Chen's chest. But after discovering that the bullet could not penetrate the bulletproof vest, the enemy used the recoil to raise the muzzle of the gun a little. This action only takes half a second to complete. Chen Chen's direction at this time was still 60 degrees away from him. Chen Chen had to complete a series of actions including turning around, aiming, and firing in order to get the bullet into his opponent's head before he did. And this is almost impossible. In the previous life, after Chen Chen had worked in the special operations team for a year, the instructor once asked all of them the same question. The question is, if the enemy is already targeting you, how do you respond? At that time, everyone gave a variety of answers. Some said to lie down quickly, some said to draw fire and fight back, some said to raise hands to protect the head, and some even said to jump up to catch the bullet. Everyone was fined 15 kilometers, and only Chen Chen was spared. Because his answer was simple: gamble your life with the enemy. Yes, there is no other choice. In movies, dodging bullets is actually very common, such as using a quick punch from 7 steps away, using a quick gun from within 7 steps, or even just shaking your head to dodge a bullet shot at close range. You can't say it's absurd. You can only say that it's an interpretation of a work of art. Because no matter what, a person cannot be faster than a bullet, and the reaction speed of a passive reaction cannot be faster than an active shooting. This is an unbreakable law in nature. If someone can do it, it can only mean one thing. That person has proved the truth of general relativity with his own flesh and blood, breaking through the speed of light in an instant and causing time to flow backwards. Although Chen Chen did not run 15 kilometers, he still remembers clearly what the instructor said afterwards. When you are targeted by the enemy, you have effectively lost all your options. If you are an ordinary soldier in an ordinary unit, then it is useful for you to dodge, hide, and protect yourself because you have countless comrades who will drag you into the trenches and send you to the hospital behind the scenes after you are injured. But unfortunately, you are not. You are special forces, and you are bound to clash with the enemy's most elite forces. You don't get a second chance. Once you are hit in an unprotected area, it means death. Similarly, there is no point in temporarily dodging. This means further missed opportunities, seemingly surviving, but in fact only dying a second or two later. In a high-intensity, high-efficiency conflict, no one can spare the energy to save you. The only thing you can do is gamble your life. Don't let the operation get out of control. Don't let your movement slow down. Raise your gun, aim at your enemy, pull the trigger, and make sure you hit the target with one shot. The enemy may make mistakes, but you must not make any mistakes. When saying these words, the instructor's expression was very serious, even a little sad. Chen Chen didn't know what he had been through, but he knew that the experience he had learned from him would save his life across time and space. His confidence swelled to the limit, and in an instant, the gun had turned. When he aimed his crosshairs at the enemy's head, flames were already spurting out of the muzzle of the enemy's gun. Chen Chen remained unmoved. The enemy's first bullet grazed his cheek, leaving a splash of blood. Immediately afterwards, Chen Chen's gun fired. The enemy's second bullet had also flown out. The two bullets fired in succession were almost unaffected by the recoil in terms of dispersion. The latter bullet followed the path of the previous bullet, but at this time, Chen Chen's position had shifted slightly due to the influence of the recoil, and the bullet finally hit him. It went straight through his right cheek, and Chen Chen's first reaction was that his tongue was very cold. The high-temperature bullet took away the saliva in the mouth, and the evaporation was accompanied by a huge airflow, so it was impossible not to feel cool. But Chen Chen was not moved at all, because he knew that on the battlefield, as long as he was conscious, he had to keep pulling the trigger. At this time, the 3-man firepower team had been completely eliminated, and the reconnaissance team in front had also been killed by the other 4. Chen Chen did not hesitate and shot the backpack behind the MPRI communication soldier, but the interrupted communication was not restored. Obviously, the real jammer is not inside the woods. This jammer is just a backup measure to achieve saturation suppression in the dense forest. Professional and cautious. Not even on the same level as the Shadow Corps he had fought before. Chen Chen quickly shot the 3 people on the ground, then sped up and ran desperately to join the other 4. The first group is solved. Number 2 switches to M249. Chen Chen started to speak, and then he realized that his voice sounded a little strange. Blood foam was still oozing out of the wound on his cheek, but fortunately, the bullet did not hit his tongue, but instead pierced his cheek straight at an extremely clever angle. The wound was not big. While Chen Chen led the team to evacuate quickly, he took out some quick tear gauze from his right pocket to stop the bleeding. Seeing his actions, Li Bang couldn't help but frown. "It's my turn next time," he said briefly. "It's your turn. Your gun is much slower than mine. You can't gain any advantage at all. 6 of them have fallen. There should be more. We have to find a way to get out, destroy their communication suppression, and then go back to the woods to hide. We must contact the rear, otherwise it will be too late." Damn, they really spent a lot of money. All of them are the latest equipment. Chen Chen answered quickly. He had seen the bullet holes on the other people's bulletproof vests. Obviously, if he hadn't quickly killed the enemy firepower group, all 5 of his team would have to die here. In the distance, a fire had already started. They actually set fire to it. They only dare to set fire to a place like this? Shirdaka asked in shock. We've already come this far. What are they afraid of? We can't give them a chance. Number 2. Set up booby traps. At this time, the noise in the woods had disappeared. The enemy slowed down the pace of the search and entered into complete silence, determined to engage in a silent hunt in the jungle with the Dongfeng Corps. Bao Qi quickly set up several booby traps and, following the guidance of the compass and led by Lin He, headed due north. It only took them 5 minutes to cover the distance of more than 100 meters. Away from the central area of the woods, the vegetation becomes sparse again. The visible range reached more than 50 meters, and the 5 people quickly lay down, but at this moment, the pickup truck guarding the road outside the woods had discovered their traces. The car quickly started moving sideways, as if trying to create an angle for shooting. Get down, pin down. Chen Chen immediately gave the order, then pulled the trigger, and bullets poured out. Bao Qi opened fire at the same time. The suppressing power of M249 was not to be underestimated after all. The overweight pickup truck suffered immediately. The sniper on the truck was shot down before he could even take aim. The machine gunner operating the heavy machine gun in the rear bucket only had time to fire a short burst of shots before he was accurately knocked down by Chen Chen. Get out! Get out! Get the heavy machine gun! Chen Chen jumped up, but the moment he stood up, he saw Bao Qi lying in a pool of blood. Fuck you. Li Gang stays behind to provide cover. Advertisement Chen didn't even look back and continued running forward. He must get that heavy machine gun. If he fails, his men will probably be surrounded and killed in this woods. At this moment, a hole was finally opened in the enemy's encirclement. After all, they were not an army. No matter how many people they could mobilize, could they still have more than 100? About 30 people. This was Chen Chen's judgment. Because if there are more people, there will be no chance of launching an ambush. Even if the other team had one more person, we would not have been able to win the conflict just now. But of course, even now, we don't actually have any advantage. One member is lost, and the Li Gang is also occupied. Chen Chen didn't have time to think. He quickly fired a few bullets to suppress the enemy in the driver's seat, and Shirdaka followed closely and killed him accurately. Taking advantage of the airstrike, Chen Chen had already taken out a new magazine. There were still a few bullets left in the old magazine, but there was no need to finish it all. This detail saved his life. The enemy hiding behind the car heard his command to change bullets and popped up to open fire. At this time, Chen Chen's hand was already on the magazine release button, but he didn't press it. After firing the last few bullets, the enemy fell on his back, and Chen Chen took the opportunity to replace the magazine, finished his reload, and climbed onto the back seat of the pickup truck. Shirdaka and Lin He aimed at both sides of the road, threw smoke bombs and opened fire to suppress the enemy. 8 people got off 2 pickup trucks and fired crazily at the Dongfeng Corps in the center from both ends. Lin He fell to the ground instantly. The cover of smoke was completely meaningless because the opponent had a thermal imager. Lin He curled up into a ball and used the bulletproof vest he was wearing to block the bullets. This bought him 2 seconds, and during these 2 seconds, Chen Chen turned the heavy machine gun around and aimed it at the enemy opposite. Bang, 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 bang. The unique sound of M2's gunfire rang out. A ball of sparks burst out from the pickup truck, and the enemy fled in panic, while Chen Chen continued to turn the muzzle of the gun towards the other side of the road. Lin He had already stood up. He was not very big, and the bulletproof vest blocked him like a shield. Fortunately, there was no further reduction in staff. Li Bang, carry the person over here. In the woods, Li Bang jumped out carrying Bao Qi. In the brief window created by the heavy machine gun, he quickly threw Bao Qi into the back of the pickup truck, then opened the door, dragged the driver's body out of the car and shouted, "Get in the car?" Shirdaka and Lin He quickly got in the car, but Li Bang did not drive the truck along the road. Instead, he stepped on the accelerator and turned the steering wheel, driving the car into the woods. There was nothing wrong with his choice, because at the moment he turned, an RPG flew straight along the road and almost hit the enemy's own vehicle at the other end of the road. Driving is like being a target. Do you really think it's like in American blockbusters where you drive for kilometers and bullets hit the car and sparks fly everywhere? With the intensity of modern firepower, within the few seconds when a vehicle passes by, a concentrated fire can turn all the carbon-based organisms on the vehicle into ashes. Their goal was to find a communication suppression radio station. If they couldn't find one, a heavy machine gun could also alleviate the pressure of insufficient firepower. Chen Chen was still firing bursts of fire from the heavy machine gun. Another RPG flew over, but the tree trunks were too dense for the rocket to pass through, blocking its path. When it was still more than 20 meters away from the pickup truck, the RPG exploded, and the blast destroyed a small patch of vegetation around it. The enemy who launched the rocket was locked by Chen Chen, and the large-caliber bullet directly split his lower body into 2 sections. Li Bang continuously threw smoke bombs to provide cover for his side as much as possible. In dense forests, smoke bombs are still effective against thermal imagers. They can reduce the temperature difference resolution of thermal imagers and prolong the opponent's reaction time. White smoke rose, and the enemy's attack pace slowed down. Chen Chen finally had the chance to turn around and take a look at Bao Qi's injuries. He was completely motionless, but fortunately, he was in a coma and not dead. The bulletproof vest had been taken off, and the trajectory of the large-caliber bullet changed after hitting the bulletproof vest. The bullet, which should have hit the right chest, deflected upwards and almost tore Bao Qi's entire right shoulder apart. The collarbone was broken, and the arm had drooped down, with only some flesh and skin remaining. This is undoubtedly a serious injury, and whether he can survive is really a question. But fortunately, the bleeding has stopped. But the problem is that the situation we are facing has not been reversed at all. The enemy had lost more than 10 men, and what next? They were still exerting pressure, and there was no way they could hold out. Even earlier, Chen Chen discovered that Lin He was also injured. It's not that he wasn't hit. The bullet pierced his calf, but it was only because of the effect of adrenaline that he didn't fall down on the spot. The fire had already started in the dense forest, and the team of 5 had no way to retreat. In the distance, the enemy continued to approach. On the other side, on the ring road around the island, 3 land cruisers and a modified Grand Cherokee medical vehicle sped along in a cloud of dust. The convoy led by Yang Shu abandoned all disguises and headed straight towards Kurno. He was well aware that he could be ambushed, but he didn't care, because he knew that if he couldn't get there in time, the members of the reconnaissance team trapped in Kurno would most likely be wiped out. In fact, Yang Shu had made a decision as soon as the communication was interrupted. He did not wait for further news, but led the remaining team members to set off immediately. This slight time advantage created an opportunity for them. Even the MPRI's interception force did not have time to be deployed. When they passed through the open area that was originally intended to be an ambush point, the MPRI team only had time to fire 2 RPG rounds. But both of them missed the target. Yang Shu led the team forward without any hesitation. At this time, every second of delay is the distance between life and death. A report from Wang Qi in the rear came through the headset, saying that the local police had already informed the police via the landline, which also allowed Yang Shu to successfully lock the location of the battle. Kurno Rubby Field Woods. The land cruiser continued to accelerate. The heavy machine gun mounted at the rear of the vehicle was aimed forward, and the cluster stun bombs had been loaded. After the last bend, 2 pickup trucks, painted black, appeared in front of everyone. The enemy was not unprepared, and a torrential rain of bullets poured down on the convoy. But just 2 seconds after they opened fire, a violent bang suddenly sounded above their heads. Boom! Then, countless bomblets fell. Bang, bang, bang. There was a flash of fire, but what exploded was not just stun grenades. That IT was also mixed with explosive and fragmentation bombs that had not been used up in the previous test and were reloaded with steel balls. After 30 rounds of explosion, dense rain of bullets swept across a large area, and Yang Shu acted decisively and led the support team to quickly launch an assault. The situation suddenly reversed, and the Type 85 heavy machine gun spewed flames, harvesting all the lives in front of it. It's not over yet. The other side has at least 3 teams with more than 18 people. There are actually only 4 teams besieging you. We have already killed 3 of them, and there are still 3 left. They will definitely launch a second attack. If we confront them head-on, it will inevitably result in heavy casualties. We have no way to evacuate. The road from Kurno to Laboda is too empty. We have no idea where they will attack, and we have no way to fight back. Captain, this is the situation. How do we fight? In a farmyard near the rugby field, Yang Shu, who had just arrived and led a group to complete the evacuation, was reporting the situation to Chen Chen. Chen Chen was looking at Ping Chuan, who was treating the wounds of Bao Qi and Lin He, while thinking quickly and analyzing the current battle situation. As Yang Shu said, the battle is not over at all. We did defeat 3 teams of MPRI, but they had a total of 6 or even 7 teams, with nearly 40 people. Now, we only have 10 people left to fight, including Ping Chuan, who does not have much experience in special operations. On the other hand, our side has already lost the jungle position, and what is bound to happen next is definitely a brutal urban street fighting. There's a lot of good news. The first is that Ping Chuan saved Bao Qi's life easily. He made the decision to amputate without any hesitation, then quickly stopped the bleeding for Bao Qi and refrigerated the severed arm with the refrigeration equipment on the medical vehicle. The role of advanced technology and equipment was fully demonstrated at this moment. If Chen Chen had handled it himself, he would probably have had to abandon his broken arm. On the other hand, large doses of hemostatic gel, sufficient blood transfusions, and quick sutures also allowed Bao Qi to recover quickly. He is now fully awake and even has basic mobility. At the same time, Lin He, who was hit in the calf by a ricochet bullet but whose injury was not serious, was also treated. After a simple bandage, removal of the bullet, and a closed injection, he was back to full health. As for Chen Chen, Ping Chuan didn't bother to do anything and just told him to rinse his mouth with alcohol and not to lick the wound with his tongue. In his opinion, Chen Chen's wound did not injure the triangular area of his face, so there was not much risk of infection. The worst that could happen was a disfigurement, which was nothing compared to Bao Qi's injury. Therefore, being ignored is normal, and Chen Chen will definitely not complain about it. The wounded were properly treated, which solved the big problem that was weighing on Chen Chen's heart. Another good news was that with the arrival of support, the Dongfeng Corps began to approach the MPRI in terms of personnel and equipment level. At least, they now have 2 heavy machine guns. No matter how desperate the MPRI is or how well-equipped they are, they must remain cautious in the subsequent attacks. The last piece of good news is that the Labada explosion was quickly quelled. Argus used thundering means and directly followed the routine of the Dongfeng Corps to throw a large number of stun bombs to suppress the crowd, quickly achieved results, and quelled the riot before it spread. At most half an hour later, the police would be able to send police to Kurno. As long as the Dongfeng Corps could hold out for 60 minutes, they would definitely be able to escape safely. However, all these good news could not cover up the only bad news. That is, the fighting will of this MPRI team is incredibly strong. Even with nearly 40% of its personnel losses, it has no intention of retreating. It has even taken the initiative to show up and prepare to launch an encirclement and suppression of the remaining forces of the Dongfeng Corps. They really intended to fight a war to the death. Chen Chen didn't know what benefits MPRI had promised to these soldiers, but he knew that the benefits must be big enough for these people to risk their lives. There is no way to retreat. If Chen Chen led the team into the woods and achieved an astonishing casualty ratio because of his almost monstrous foresight that won a glimmer of hope for the Dongfeng Corps, then the next battle is destined to be a face-to-face, abrupt collision of swords and iron. No one does anything fancy. Whoever is stronger will survive. Whoever breaks first will die. Thinking of this, Chen Chen breathed a sigh of relief and said, "There is no additional support available. I've already contacted my superiors, I've contacted my boss. The mobile brigade cannot participate in this conflict." MPRI's action was also an official action, and they had the military's endorsement. Our conflict is not just a clash between 2 mercenary groups, but a tussle between the military and the president. No one wants to wade into this muddy water. We can only rely on ourselves. Advertisement time is very tight. The interception force they deployed on the ring road will be in place soon. We can't fight CQB because they have RPGs. The buildings here are too fragile. If we stay indoors, we'll die. Jungle fighting won't work either. There are no dense trees nearby for us to hide in. We have to try another strategy. What kind of fighting style? Yangshu asked do upfuli. Fight in the open. Line up and be shot? Shirdaikai asked subconsciously, who said that fighting in open areas means being lined up and shot. Special operations can only be achieved in open areas. We have no other choice. With communication suppressed, any fancy tactics are useless. Everyone listen to my command. Move quickly and occupy the commanding heights on the northern cliff. Use the favorable terrain to block the enemy. If they dare to come, we will crush them to death here. On the other side, outside the football field, MPRI surveillance post. The man held a telescope and looked at the rapidly maneuvering Dongfeng Corps with a serious expression on his face. It's been 45 minutes, and we haven't finished them off yet. This team is really strong. No wonder they were able to completely destroy the Shadow Army in Pubei. Their commander was very sharp and decisive, and he would not even hesitate to abandon the wounded. Cold-blooded, determined, and fierce. If all the people in the north are like this, how can we fight in the future? The most hateful thing is that he is smarter than us. The backup has arrived, but he doesn't even plan to evacuate. He wants to force us to evacuate first. Only in this way can they get the greatest safety. They even took into account the changes in personnel. If there are few people, they will hide. When there are enough people, they will come out to fight us head-on. The next step is the decisive battle. Contact the superiors and ask them to increase the budget. I'm going to beat them completely. This time, I want to see how they plan to fight. Hearing his words, the adjutant standing beside him nodded immediately. But after hesitating for a moment, he spoke again. They are heading towards the cliffs by the sea. The terrain there is very flat. Are they going to fight us in an open area? Right? Very smart choice. Clever. Of course it's smart. The high ground reduces the risk of being attacked by snipers, and fighting in open areas can slow down the rate of casualties on both sides to the greatest extent. He doesn't even need to pursue killing, as long as he suppresses us and waits for new support. The man's eyes were grim as he continued. I really wish I had a helicopter or a mortar. Unfortunately, we don't even have many RPGs. Let's go. The ambush team is already in place. Pull them over and fight them head-on. The so-called open terrain combat actually generally refers to combat in hills, grasslands, deserts, rocky areas, and plateaus with a vertical drop of less than 50 meters. Since the field of vision in open areas is vast, both wide and deep, there are fewer cover and available terrain features. So the use of formations and tactical maneuvers become a very important topic. Although special forces of various countries will use more thrilling subjects such as CQB in demonstrations, in actual training, open terrain operations are given more weight. This is what must be done to adapt to the battlefield environment, and it is also a tactic that must be familiar to win. In fact, Chen Chen had already trained in open terrain combat. Back in the Devil's Month, the point capturing training was a typical open terrain combat. But such training is only special training in a narrow sense. It is not systematic and cannot bring out the true power of a tactic. But now, he is not worried about the training level of the Dongfeng Corps. We all came out of the mountains of corpses and seas of blood, and we have long learned to follow orders and adapt to circumstances. They were like finished building blocks that began to possess properties that allowed Chen Chen to combine and arrange them freely. Therefore, after quickly arriving at the designated combat area, Chen Chen made corresponding arrangements according to the plan. According to the standard division of labor for a 12-person team, he divided the team into 3 parts. There are 2 people in the reconnaissance team, 2 firepower teams with 8 people, and a command team with 2 people. Bao Qi, who was already seriously injured, could no longer undertake any high-intensity combat missions, so he was assigned to a group with Chen Chen and took on the responsibility of assisting in command. The car sped towards the cliff, and after passing through the path, a bare and suspenseful scene appeared in front of everyone. In fact, beach cliffs all over the world look the same. Dark black reefs, the azure blue sea in the distance, fine sand and gravel, and sparse vegetation. Chen Chen quickly glanced around, and through the remote control car, he had prepared directly down. The frequency band of this remote control car is different from other long-distance communication facilities. Although it is subject to strong electromagnetic interference, blurry images can still be seen. Afterwards, Chen Chen directly ordered the driver to drive the car onto the cliff. After a violent bumpy ride, the wheels got stuck directly into the gap between the rocks. Everyone pushed the door and got out of the car. Chen Chen did not try to keep anyone to operate the heavy machine gun, because he knew that this would definitely be the first target of the opponent's RPG. He simply ordered the homemade cannon to be taken down, then quickly climbed onto the vehicle, and after taking a quick look from a high place, he determined the positions of each team. Because he had no visual advantage and didn't know where the enemy would attack from, Chen Chen could only arrange 2 fire groups to stand guard with their backs to each other and set up fire points in echelons along the north-south beach. Fortunately, there were many rocks on the beach cliffs which provided many shelters for the Dongfeng Corps. Without actively firing, the other side had no way to use infrared observation equipment to penetrate the rocks and confirm the location of the Dongfeng Corps. Everything is ready, and the Dongfeng Corps is quietly waiting for the enemy to arrive. It took them less than 5 minutes from completing first aid for the injured to leaving the house and driving towards the cliff. But within 5 minutes, the enemy also responded and maneuvered quickly. Just when the firepower point was in place, and Chen Chen had not even had time to find a suitable concealed observation position, an RPG suddenly flew from the sparse woods on the west side of the cliff and hit the pickup truck that Chen Chen used as a cover, blowing it into a fireball. This is the time difference, this is timing. If Chen Chen hesitated for even 1 more minute, the Dongfeng Corps might have been intercepted on the way to the cliff and caught off guard. But fortunately, he was really fast. Even if the Dongfeng Corps was dragging 2 wounded soldiers, they were still fast. The flames of burning gasoline distorted the air in front of him. Chen Chen shouted, "Take cover! Everyone take cover! Don't rush to fire!" The reconnaissance team establishes vision. Lin He, control the unmanned vehicle and report the enemy's position. The enemy is deploying in the woods to the west. The unmanned vehicle has been destroyed. Chen Chen subconsciously looked back. At this moment, the screen on the monitor held by Lin He, who was not far from him, was already dark and showed no signal. MPRI's reaction was extremely fast, and the unmanned vehicle, which did not have time to do much concealment, was almost instantly killed. The other party's actions were so decisive that it was frightening, as if they had known in advance that the unmanned vehicle was there. Chen Chen's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and he subconsciously looked up into the air. He always felt that he was being monitored, but he had looked up several times before and had not seen any trace of a drone. Even if it is an RQ-11, flying at an altitude below 200 meters, it should be able to see a dot. But there was nothing in the sky. The sky was clear, and there was not even a cloud where an aircraft could hide. How did they find out? Without time to think, Chen Chen quickly hid back in the bunker. He changed his position from time to time and used the thermal imager to observe, but the enemy remained hidden in the woods and did not show up for 5 minutes. This made Chen Chen feel a lot of pressure, because he knew that unlike his own side who wanted to delay the game, the other side would definitely play a quick attack. Not to mention 5 minutes. They couldn't wait even for 1 minute. But now, just as he was thinking about how to deal with it, there was a loud bang, and the rock in front of Chen Chen suddenly shattered. Large caliber sniper rifle. .50 bullets. Chen Chen's eyes were red with anger. He was now 100% sure that there was definitely something in the sky. Smoke bombs. Throw them all. Li Gang, aim your cannons at the woods across the street and fire a tear gas bomb to delay their attack. The order was immediately executed, and the last cluster tear gas canister was fired into the distant woods. There were continuous explosions, and the gunfire from the opposite side paused briefly. But then, the highly recognizable sound of the M2 heavy machine gun suddenly rang out. In just a few seconds, the sweeping rain of bullets shattered countless reefs, causing casualties to the Dongfeng Corps. The bullet did not hit anyone directly, but the broken and flying rocks scratched the short man's neck, just missing the aorta. The situation was very passive. Chen Chen lay down directly in the gap between the reefs, then quickly raised the telescope and began to search the sky. The range was too large, and he couldn't find any abnormal targets in such a short time. Now there was only one possibility left. Either the other party is using a high-altitude reconnaissance drone, or the other party is releasing a reconnaissance balloon. Judging from the environment in Indonesia, the latter is more likely. Chen Chen took a deep breath, suppressed his nervousness, stabilized his hands, and searched slowly. This time his luck finally worked. After searching nearly 40% of the sky areas where aircraft may appear, he finally saw the balloon flying in the air. The height is at least 2,000 meters, and there is no way for us to touch it. You can see, but you can't hit. The enemy opens the entire map, but you can only fire blindly. This was the most difficult situation Chen Chen had ever encountered. He wished he could call the helicopter or the mobile brigade over right now to teach the MPRI on the opposite side a good lesson. But he also knew that such an idea could only be wishful thinking. Advertisement at this time. The deterrent effect created by tear gas and stun grenades has disappeared, and the gunfire from the opposite side has become more frequent again. Chen Chen did not sit there and wait for death. With the help of smoke bombs as cover, he quickly changed his position and observed, and finally found the position of the sniper on the opposite side. Chen Chen raised his gun. At this time, the sea breeze was blowing behind him, blowing away the smoke, and the wind direction was almost completely aligned with the direction of the gun muzzle. The 7-word formula was executed in an instant. The ACOG's crosshairs locked onto the vague target. Chen Chen quickly pulled the trigger, and 2 bullets flew out of the chamber. Afterwards, he did not wait for the hit mark to appear above the enemy's head like in a shooting game, but immediately dodged and fell down. At the moment he fell down, a large caliber bullet shot from another angle had penetrated the reef where he was originally located. The debris hit Chen Chen's back of the head and caused him pain. The sharp rocks beneath him had cut his arms and thighs, but he did not stop for a second. Instead, he continued to crawl forward. At the same time, gunfire from fire groups in other positions had already rang out, and they had finally organized the first observation of the enemy. I have to say, this is really frustrating. How can you fight the enemy when there is a technological gap? The existence of high altitude reconnaissance balloons ensures that the enemy's ODA will never be interrupted. The opportunity you have seized with great difficulty may be worthless to them. Heavy machine gun at 11 o'clock. Sniper at 1 o'clock. Active target spotted at 9 o'clock. Enemy flanks surrounding us. Report after report reached Chen Chen's ears. He stood up again and made a peek at an extremely fast speed. A flash of red light appeared before my eyes, and at least 4 people were surrounding me from the 9 o'clock direction. There is no way to intercept them, and if they show their heads, they will be beaten. Chen Chen raised his gun and fired, but his action brought about a fierce counterattack. Chen Chen quickly retracted his hand and crawled into the crevice of the reef again. There's no way to fight. There's really no way to fight. With the advantage of high-altitude vision, the enemy can preview at a speed ahead of ours. Casualties began to occur, and the enemy, under cover of heavy machine gun fire, began to advance. They deployed in a double arrow attack formation from the flank, with 2 groups of 12 people providing alternating cover, while in the front, a heavy machine gun and the rest of the personnel provided continuous suppressive fire. Chen Chen quickly commanded all the team members to change positions, and during the changing of guards alone, 2 people were shot and fell down. Report the injury. I've fine. There was only one person's answer, and Chen Chen was extremely anxious. The enemy's attack group on the flank was very close to the reef area. If they also occupied the bunker, the Dongfeng Corps would not have any chance to fight back. The M2's gunfire almost never stopped, and every counterattack by the Dongfeng Corps was extremely difficult. As long as the head is exposed, someone will get hurt. Almost everyone was risking their lives to hold back the approaching attack group. They had no time to observe or aim, and every shot depended on luck to determine whether it could hit the enemy. It shouldn't have turned out like this. This should have been a standard positional defensive battle. How could the defending side be suppressed to the point where they couldn't even raise their heads? Ultimately, it is the advantage of vision. By knowing the position of the Dongfeng Corps, the opponent's suppression can be done with absolute precision and efficiency. No bullet is wasted, and every shot will give them an advantage. The frontal covering fire must be eliminated as soon as possible, as this is the only breakthrough. If there is no other option, I can only exchange my life with them. Two groups of 6 versus 6, there is a chance to kill the opponent's fire support group, and the remaining few people have the advantage of cover, and they may not be defeated by their remaining personnel. Chen Chen clenched the gun handle and gritted his teeth. But just as he was about to give the order, there was a roar of an engine suddenly from the sky. Chen Chen looked up subconsciously. At this moment, he thought that Xiaoyu had finally made use of his connections and summoned reinforcements from the mobile brigade. But alas, it is not. It was just an ordinary seaplane on the Indonesian coast, nothing special about it. Chen Chen's heart sank instantly, but the next second, a scene that shocked him appeared. The seaplane began to spit fire. Then, the unique explosion sound of the 85 heavy machine came from afar. At this moment, a burst of continuous noise suddenly came from Chen Chen's radio. Soon after, communications were restored. The reconnaissance balloon was shot down. The seaplane is Wang Chi's security department. Qingshan calls the east wind. Qingshan calls the east wind. Dongfeng received. 200 meters of woods perpendicular to the coastline. Destroy their fire support team. Without any sensationalism or questioning, Chen Chen gave the order the moment he was sure that support had arrived. Soon, the seaplane changed its flight direction, and the 85-ton heavy machine that had been loaded onto the plane somehow began to spit flames towards the woods on the inside of the cliff. Hit high and hit low, hit the idiot. This vulgar proverb clearly describes the advantage of the high position. The enemy fire support team on the ground wants to fight back but has no chance at all. With the suppressive firepower cessation, the Dongfeng Corps finally found an opportunity to counterattack. Almost all the people who were still able to move stood up from the bunkers in unison, and the anger that had been accumulated for the entire battle surged out. Although the enemy's double arrow attack group immediately opened fire to fight back, they could not withstand the desperate firepower of the Dongfeng Corps in the bunker. In just one encounter, 4 of the 12 people fell. The remaining 8 people hit on the spot, but at this time, the seaplane in the sky had already eliminated the firepower group in the woods. Suppression is complete. Dongfeng, you take over. Understood. Team 2, suppress the enemy support team. Qingshan, clear out the enemy attack team. Clear. The voice that reassured Chen Chen came from the headset again. The seaplane rose and flew over his head, then drew a graceful arc in the distant sky, flying towards suspense in a direction perpendicular to the coastline. The sound of heavy machine gun fire rang out, and smoke and dust rose up on the ground, mixed with a little blood foam. This is a low-end version of the Warthog attack aircraft, and it did plow through the field again and again, just like that daunting Warthog. After the plane flew over, there was no living creature on the ground. Of course, this may not be accurate. To be precise, the ground was not entirely covered with corpses. There were also half-dead soldiers and their broken limbs. In the face of air superiority, all-ground fire suppression became a joke. The Type 85 heavy machine gun cleared the covering fire in the woods and smashed the 12 members of the double arrow attack team into pieces within a few tens of seconds. Even the places not reached by the heavy machine guns had been cleared one by the ground forces of the Dongfeng Corps. Only after washing away the makeup can the true color be revealed. When the two sides really started to shoot each other, Chen Chen suddenly realized that the MPRI team was not as strong as he thought. They will be afraid, they will hesitate, their movements will be distorted, and their choices will be misjudged. Faced with the 7 combat-capable people from the Dongfeng Corps, they had almost no room for resistance. This is exactly the effect Chen Chen wanted to achieve by choosing this place as his position, using complex cover to gain advantage. Originally in his plan, he had already considered how to use compound slope fire nets, single flanks, double flanks, and 3-sided attack methods to teach MPRI a lesson. But unfortunately, the opponent did not give him this opportunity at all. They did not accept the challenge, but just hoped to crush the Dongfeng Corps with absolute technology. In this situation, the Dongfeng Corps can only break through with absolute technology. The flying seaplane is the sharp knife to break through the barrier. On the radio, Chen Chen expressed his gratitude to Wang Chi. The latter had plenty of fuel, so he was not in a hurry to return, but continued to hover in the sky, providing necessary fire cover for the Dongfeng Corps. The battlefield was basically cleared, and Chen Chen captured 2 seriously injured prisoners. Looking at the enemy's wounded and then at the wounded of the Dongfeng Corps, Ping Chuan made a quick judgment. We are very extreme here. The 2 of them are beyond saving. They've been shot in the chest with large caliber bullets. Even gods can't save them. They're already unconscious. I don't intend to torture them. Let them go in peace. The other 2 have minor injuries and can be treated or not for now. These 2 enemies can still be saved. I suggest saving their lives first. Ping Chuan's words were extremely calm, even indifferent, and at the same time, extremely counterintuitive. Logically speaking, no matter what the circumstances, shouldn't we rescue our own wounded first? No matter whether it is serious or minor, just save him first. But in fact, many times, the pros and cons must be weighed on the battlefield. Is it more valuable to rescue 2 hopeless wounded men or to rescue an enemy intelligence source? The answer is obvious. A person who is destined to die cannot save his own life, but effective intelligence can save many lives. This should have been the decision made by Chen Chen, but Ping Chuan spoke it out first and took part of the responsibility. Chen Chen nodded slowly and replied, rescue the other 2 first as long as they can talk. Li Bang, bandage yourself and help the fishermen while you're at it. I'll go check on the others. As he spoke, Chen Chen walked over to the other 2. The 2 members who came to Indonesia together were named Song Yin and Mei Miao. The nicknames they gave themselves were Cricket and Fighting Cock. They are both aggressive and ferocious animals, but they are also fragile animals. Of course, Chen Chen has different closeness and distance with the members of the Dongfeng Corps, but in fact he is very familiar with everyone. For example, he knew that crickets and fighting cocks both have families. Of course, it's not that miserable. A mercenary from Pubei, would definitely not be very good to his family, and he wouldn't have any ordinary dreams of raising children into adults and letting his wife live a happy life in the future. I'm afraid that their purpose in working with Chen Chen is just to make more money, buy more luxury cars and houses, and have more women. But it was precisely because of this that Chen Chen felt that their deaths were particularly regrettable. Because he still remembered their excited expressions when they first landed in Jakarta, carrying large and small bags in their hands. The desire to act like a rich man, but not being able to do so, the hope that I had opened the door to a new world and was about to usher in a new life, was shattered in an instant. In fact, they're just ordinary people. Chen Chen sighed and squatted down. The bulletproof vests of cricket and fighting cock had been removed, and their injuries were exactly the same, both with penetrating wounds in the right chest. The bulletproof vests were pierced by large caliber bullets. Although the kinetic energy was greatly reduced, the rotating bullets still penetrated deep into the chest and completely crushed their lungs. A big hole was exposed and open, and every breath they took was accompanied by a sharp sound of the friction between the lungs, like a groan, but actually not. Can you survive if you cut off your lungs? Chen Chen asked. No way. No need to ask, he's in deep shock and can't be saved. Don't wake them up, just let them go. Chen Chen subconsciously pried open the fighting cock's wound. This action was strange, but he just wanted to use his experience to confirm whether the other party was still worth rescuing. But it's really a pity that it's really gone. He sighed and wiped the blood off his hands on his clothes. Give me a sedative. Chen Chen continued to speak, and then Ping Chuan, who was busy stopping the bleeding, threw 2 tubes of sedatives over. Chen Chen injected them into the carotid arteries of the fighting cock and the cricket respectively. After more than 10 seconds, the two stopped breathing. Everyone who saw this scene looked a little gloomy. Yang Shu came over and pulled Chen Chen, but Chen Chen pushed his hand away and said, "Don't bother with me. Contact the police and block Chrono. It's almost an hour. They should be here by now." Clear. Yang Shu answered immediately, while Li Bang walked up to an MPRI soldier who had been awakened by Ping Chuan and asked, "Captain, how do we interrogate him?" Chen Chen walked over, looked at the terrified white man, and said, "Where is your commander? He definitely can't go with you. If you die, he won't give your family a penny. I'll kill him, and you'll come back alive to share the money." Hearing his words, the man nodded immediately. He was shot in the abdomen, so it was a little difficult for him to speak, but he still answered, "A flat-roofed house near Chrono Primary School." "They are there. There's a flat-roofed house near Chrono Primary School. Qingshan, keep an eye on it and shoot a bunch of bullets. Don't let the people inside escape." Qingshan understands. Fly over now. Chen Chen let go of the man in his hand, and Li Bang looked at him, seemingly asking questions. But Chen Chen shook his head, indicating that he should spare the lives of the two men. Advertisement, all those who needed to make up the guns had done so. After roll call, there were still 7 people left in the Dongfeng Corps who could move, but Ping Chuan had to stay and take care of the wounded. Therefore, Chen Chen decisively ordered the troops to split into 2 groups. Li Bang stayed behind to guard, while he took Yang Shushi Dakai and the short-legged man and quickly got into the car and rushed to the location of the residential building. "Dongfeng, I've confirmed the target. The 2 targets tried to drive away, but I intercepted them. The target is still inside the building and has weapons." Clear. Chen Chen answered briefly and stepped on the accelerator even harder. In less than 3 minutes, the 4 people had reached the street where the target building was located. Instead of driving, they got out of the car and walked forward. This was to avoid the risk of the 2 officers inside possibly holding explosive weapons, but in fact, they did not encounter any counterattack until they approached within 50 meters. Chen Chen couldn't help but frown. They didn't think he could still negotiate, did they? In other words, they didn't think that they could rely on the military's connections to get away with it after they had caused such a big incident in Chrono, which even vaguely resembled an armed rebellion, right? It was impossible, so the answer could only be that they had not given up resistance, and the calm was just an illusion they had deliberately created. Catch them alive if possible. Be alert and do not enter the building. Point the gun at the window. Fire at any time. Clear. Everyone answered in turn, and the 4 of them formed a standard single column, close to the side of the street, and approached the house. At this time, the seaplane in the air had already fired a second round of bullets, maintaining deterrence against the enemies in the building. At a distance of 30 meters, Chen Chen threw the first round of smoke bombs. After the smoke exploded, he continued to throw stun grenades towards the window. At this moment, the counterattack in the house finally began. A hand appeared at the window and threw 2 smoke bombs out. But in reality, both sides' actions of throwing smoke bombs are just deceiving themselves. Who doesn't have a thermal imager? In the absence of special anti-infrared smoke bombs, this action is purely to put psychological pressure on the opponent. Don't go in, surround them, and wait for police support. Chen Chen spoke again, and Yang Shu, who was already a little impatient, could only suppress the urge to rush in again. During the mission, no one had the right to question Chen Chen's decision, so the 2 sides confronted each other, and the situation was at a stalemate for a while. As time passed, the situation began to turn in favor of the Dongfeng Corps. Chen Chen knew that the other party might still send new reinforcements in a short time. But if someone came, Chen Chen would definitely give up the goal of capturing them alive and directly let Wang Qi raise the house to the ground. Just as he had judged before, Indonesian houses are all ordinary brick and wood structures. How many 12.7mm large-caliber bullets can such a structure withstand? Not to mention that the 4 members of the Dongfeng Corps could gather 8 dual-purpose offensive and defensive grenades and throw them directly into the building. Absolutely no one would be able to withstand it. The other party will definitely fight back. All we have to do is sit back and wait, then push them back. This thought had just flashed through Chen Chen's mind when someone at the door suddenly threw 3 stun grenades at the same time. Chen Chen didn't even blink. He steadied the muzzle of the gun and pulled the trigger. He was more than 20 meters away from the main entrance, and with the protection of goggles, the glare caused by the stun grenade was reduced a lot. The enemy on the opposite side, who thought he could gain the upper hand with stun grenade, directly loaded it on the muzzle of Chen Chen's gun. 3 consecutive armor-piercing bullets hit him in the chest, causing him to fall on his back, and then he rolled back into the house. This attempt to break out ended in failure, and at this time, the sirens from Laboda in the distance were getting closer. What should we do? Can we surrender? The adjutant returned to the room, panting as he looked at the man opposite him, at the commander known as Bumblebee. He looked terrified, yet also grateful for having survived the disaster. Those bullets just now really scared him. If the trajectory had deviated an inch upwards, his neck would have been broken. But it was obvious that the people outside the door did not want to take their lives directly, but wanted to wait for the police to arrive and capture them alive, and then obtain the information they wanted. This choice was extremely rational and restrained, even to the point where the adjutant was a little scared. To be fair, if I were that man, it would be impossible for me to maintain this level of calmness from beginning to end. After all, their side had just organized a conspiracy completely against them, causing them heavy losses and even almost wiping them out. How could they resist taking revenge? The adjutant was very confused, but also very grateful. He knew that as long as he was not shot on the spot, he would still have a chance. And sure enough, after hearing his words, Commander Bumblebee nodded slowly. I have contacted my superiors, and someone will protect us. It's troublesome, but you should be able to survive. Let's not try to clash with them again. Remember, stick to your confession. This is just a misjudgment of intelligence. We wanted to capture JD elements in this area, but we happened to run into the Dongfeng Corps with the same goal. The conflict occurred due to lack of communication between the two parties. This is a complete misunderstanding, a tragedy, but not a war. Understand? Clear. The adjutant nodded immediately. How could he not understand? In fact, they had used this method countless times in the Middle East. Even some murders of civilians were covered up with this excuse. No one will care, and no one will pursue it. As long as they are not killed, they can just wait for the local official forces to arrive. Thinking of this, the adjutant asked, what should we do now? Should we express our intention to surrender directly, or continue to confront them? Keep the standoff. We don't know their identities. We must not know their identities before the police arrive. Do you understand? The adjutant nodded again and replied, clear. After a pause, he said with some fear and worry, but I'm afraid they can't wait. Don't worry, they can definitely wait. We are a big fish to them, and they will never let us die easily. Don't even try it. Even if they don't have a plane overhead, and even if they only have 4 people, our chances of winning are no more than 30%. Just wait quietly. The police are coming. Now send a few more smoke bombs outside. Be careful. Don't get hit. Good. The adjutant turned around, grabbed the few remaining smoke bombs, and threw them out of the window. At this moment, through the window, he could already see the flashing police lights outside. The police force arrived quickly, but the personnel who arrived at the same time surprised Chen Chen a little. Someone came in person. It's not Argus, it's Ga Yaozi. He should be in Kandari now, not in this desolate Chrono. And his appearance itself implies a lot of things. The most important point is that MPRI's identity has been exposed, and they actually took off their clothes directly. Chen Chen's heart sank instantly. He knew that if this was the case, many things he wanted to do would become difficult to do. After seeing Chen Chen, a look of shame flashed across Ga Yaozi's face for a moment, but soon he straightened his expression and walked towards Chen Chen. Before Chen Chen could speak, he took the initiative to extend his hand, and then said, Mr. Chen Chen, I am Ga Yaozi, and I am responsible for handling this incident. I am very sorry that you have suffered huge losses due to the negligence of the police, but this is just a misunderstanding. At this point, Ga Yaozi's eyes were somewhat unwilling. Chen Chen could see that his words were insincere, and the hostility in his heart was reduced a little. He was actually prepared for this result, but he never expected that the other party would act so quickly, not even leaving a time window for his side to review the case. There is no doubt that the president is indeed at a comprehensive disadvantage at this time, and what he has made now is the most forced compromise. Thinking of this, Chen Chen let out a long sigh, and then asked, what kind of misunderstanding is it? Ga Yaozi gritted his teeth and replied, these so-called militants are employees of MPRI International Military Outsourcing Company. They have deep cooperation with Task Force 88. They are tracking down an extremist group called ISK. The informant provided them with intelligence, and they have been planning this for a long time. However, your presence disrupted their plans. They mistook your identities and thought you were professional mercenaries hired by ISK. So, there was a conflict. That's it. A sneer appeared on Chen Chen's face, and he said, what a good reason. The misunderstanding is too coincidental. Yeah, what a coincidence. Ga Yaozi also sneered. In fact, like Chen Chen, he did not hate this group of militants at all, but at least he did not have the slightest favorable impression towards them. But there was nothing he could do. The situation was stronger than he was. He had already taken on a hot job, and if another one came, he might not be able to handle it. In addition, his superiors, including the president, had ambiguous attitudes, so he had no choice but to bow his head and try to resolve the matter in the way those people needed. In fact, when he was on the road, he thought about contacting Chen Chen, explaining the situation to him, and even using him to do something, but in the end, he did not make up his mind. He didn't want to get involved himself, because it was too dangerous. Similarly, the Dongfeng Corps misjudged the situation and lost its last chance. Ga Yaozi sighed, as if he had let go of something in his heart. Then he shook his head and said, you should move faster. Chen Chen nodded helplessly and replied, I misjudged the situation. I didn't expect them to move so quickly. I never thought that they could handle such a big thing. What a bullshit excuse, what a bullshit misunderstanding. I want to ask, has the DSS's infiltration here reached this level? Hearing his words, Ga Yaozi nodded slowly. That's why I'm standing here and saying this to you. They're destroying our country, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. Okay, let's stop here. I'm going to take him away. I don't think you need any more information, do you? Their purpose is very clear. Everything is a deal. You know what I mean? Chen Chen nodded slowly without saying anything, but watched Ga Yaozi turn around and walk into the house. He noticed that Ga Yaozi's back was a little hunched and realized that this person might be one of those grassroots people in Indonesia who wanted to change the status quo. But he really had no choice. He is still a person of little influence and still has no control over his own affairs. In fact, it was quite nice of him to say these to me. If a more corrupt policeman came here, even Chen Chen might not be able to stand here, but would be directly driven away or even arrested. And, just as Ga Yaozi said, having fought to this point, he really didn't need any more intelligence. MPRI's intentions have been fully exposed. Next, they will use the interests in their hands to settle this big matter. There is nothing I could do about it. All I could do was watch them leave. Soon, Ga Yaozi came out of the house with two people. The leading man walked straight towards Chen Chen, stretched out his hand, and said, "Advertisement, Mr. Chen Chen. This is a misunderstanding. My name is different, and I'm sorry for both of our losses. But I hope that ends here. You know, you're not without fault. We had called off the conflict, but your planes just killed all my team members. Maybe we'll have a chance to meet again in the future. I hope that by then, we'll have a chance to talk about this matter." This was a naked provocation. Chen Chen snorted coldly and replied, "Maybe I'm not the one you should talk to." The bumblebee was stunned for a moment, then suddenly laughed. "Indeed, it's not you. Maybe it's the insurance company, Mr. Chen Chen. Have you bought insurance for your team members? If there is insurance, everyone's losses will be smaller. Is your insurance strong?" Chen Chen asked. "At least it kept me alive. You see, I was able to get out of the situation thanks to the insurance. Next time, if it's you." Tu Feng spread his hands and continued, "Don't choose the wrong insurance company, Mr. Chen. Hurry up, you see, guns can't talk." Just then, Chen Chen's cell phone rang. He picked up the phone and made a wait gesture to Bumblebee. After a moment, Xiaoyu's voice came from the phone. "Who did you catch?" "A man called Bumblebee. I cannot say his name. He was standing opposite me." "It's okay. I know who he is. He's the actual contact of ISK. How about your losses?" "2 dead and 5 injured. 2 seriously injured." "What are you going to do?" "I can't do anything about it. The police are involved, and the deal has been done." "No." Xiaoyu interrupted Chen Chen. "No. We deny it. In the explosion that just happened in the suburb of Labada, Chinese employees were seriously injured." "Hang up." Chen Chen put the phone back into his pocket. He couldn't listen anymore, and Xiaoyu couldn't continue talking either. Then, Chen Chen pulled out the pistol from his waist and pointed it at the bumblebee. The latter was startled, but then laughed. "Mr. Chen, are you kidding me? It seems like you don't want to talk to me anymore." Chen Chen shook his head and replied, "No, I want someone to talk to you. But maybe, once it speaks, you won't be able to answer." Hearing this, Bumblebee's eyes widened. He wanted to say something else, but Chen Chen had already pulled the trigger. Bah! The bullet from the FN-57 pierced through Tu Feng's skull. The adjutant standing behind him subconsciously wanted to touch his gun, but was shot down by Yang Shu, who had been waiting for a long time. After 2 short gunshots, Chen Chen looked at Ga Yaozi, who was standing aside, stunned. He was there to pull out a gun and attack the police. "Did I misunderstand?" Ga Yaozi took a deep breath and replied, "Yes, you misunderstood." Chen Chen did not mean to impulsively kill the leader of MPRI without any consideration. In fact, after confirming with Xiaoyu, he had obtained at least 3 key pieces of information. The first is that this man named Tu Feng is not just a small character from somewhere. The fact that he can get a number from Xiaoyu shows that he has an important position in MPRI's Indonesian layout. Defeating him can speed up the disintegration of the United States and the infiltration of JD forces in Indonesia. The value is far higher than the political cost that Xiaoyu and others have to bear. After all, it was the other side that took action first this time. And after taking action, they came up with a reason that even a fool could not stand up to, trying to get away with it. Even for the top military leaders, it would be impossible to turn the situation around with this point. The most they could do was to make the president's side give up the extra advantage they should have gotten. And now, the president already has enough advantages, so he doesn't need this at all. The second is to consider the survival and development of the Dongfeng Corps itself. The Dongfeng Corps suffered heavy losses in this operation. Half of its manpower was wiped out in one battle, and there were even 2 casualties. Under such circumstances, not punishing the main culprit would not be enough to quell the surging anger within the group. Of course, Chen Chen can use his authority to say something absolutely correct like, put the overall situation first, and others will definitely accept his explanation. But no matter what, if the ideas are not clear, a team will not be able to develop stably and long-term. The Dongfeng Corps is a violent organization after all, and violent organizations are naturally associated with the attribute of revenge. Don't think that it is stupid for gangsters to kill whole families or fight over trivial matters. In fact, this is the only correct way for them to survive. Because every provocation is testing your bottom line. Every conflict is using the threshold effect and broken window effect to gradually undermine your will. Chen Chen cannot make even one compromise because as long as there is a first time, there will be countless times. Thirdly, regarding the issue of intelligence, he really didn't need Tu Feng and his adjutant, because he still had 2 survivors. The next action will undoubtedly be based on clearance. Chen Chen does not need to investigate their purpose, nor does he need any extra evidence. All he needs is a location, and those 2 survivors should be able to fully meet this simple intelligence need. Therefore, after comprehensive consideration of these 3 points, Chen Chen killed the bumblebee without hesitation, and it was obvious that his action did not cause any dissatisfaction from Ga Yaozi at all. He even seemed to be a bit very happy, which surprised Chen Chen. "Aren't you worried about the aftermath?" Chen Chen asked. Ga Yaozi shook his head and replied, "Since you dare to do it, you must have your reasons. I can give you a good excuse. For example, he wanted to use our cover to kill you, but you reacted faster than him and fired before him. That's actually quite reasonable, because I guarantee you, that's exactly what he thinks. If I really take him away, when he leaves me, you will be the ones in trouble, right? It makes sense indeed." Chen Chen nodded slightly and continued. "At least it's more reasonable than the so-called misunderstanding." "That's right, so stop thinking about these problems and go do what you need to do. I'll take care of this." You are our partner, and we should provide you with certain conveniences. No problem. Chen Chen nodded immediately, and then led the other 3 people directly into the house. The spoils belong to us. How about that? Ga Yaozi made a gesture to let him go, and Chen Chen immediately went upstairs. When he pushed open the door and saw the layout inside, he was stunned. For an outsider, there was nothing special about the things in this room. It's just a few computers and a few monitors. But Chen Chen knew that what appeared here could almost be said to represent the most advanced military technology in the entire United States. Ground Warrior Individual Command System Command Terminal. This thing began to be developed in 1993, but by 2011, less than 50,000 soldiers were equipped with combat terminals, and the number of command terminals was less than 1,000. Most of them were deployed in the United States and European military bases. Even in the Middle East, only a few combat brigades were equipped with this system. And now, in Indonesia, in the barren land of Krno, he actually saw equipment of this level. No wonder this battle was so difficult. It turned out that the other party was really cheating, like the relatively well-known data link system. The Ground Warrior system is also a highly integrated microelectronic and database system. The system equipment includes radio, GPS, individual PDA, camera, and other equipment. After entering the second decade of the 21st century, the equipment covered by the system has even expanded to sights, firearms, and bulletproof vests. Once the entire system is activated, the infantry is no longer a separate combat unit, but a part of the entire C4ISR combat network. Through the war zone LAN, the commander can easily obtain first-hand battlefield intelligence, understand the location of each soldier, the number of enemies faced, the combat situation, and even the casualties and killing efficiency information. To exaggerate, the commanders standing behind the system have almost completely broken away from traditional technology and become as easy as a real-time strategy game. No wonder after the high-altitude balloon was shot down, I could clearly feel that the opponent's level had dropped by more than one level. It turned out that the thing was not only responsible for communication interference and surveillance, but also the information forwarding center of the Ground Warrior system. Looking at the equipment in front of him, Chen Chen couldn't help but sigh. In order to kill me, they really spent a lot of money. If the system can also be seized, it would be a huge profit. Unfortunately, all equipment has been completely physically destroyed, and once the system is disconnected from the C4I network, all data stored in it will inevitably be remotely destroyed. I saw it, but that's all I saw. I can't really use it. Chen Chen sighed and began to look for other useful equipment. However, after looking around, he found that the advanced equipment of this team was mainly concentrated in the field of electronic warfare. The PDAs stripped from them were completely useless, and the guns were just ordinary 416 Hong Kong dollars in M4. Perhaps the only thing he got was a more advanced night vision device. There was no model number or logo, but Chen Chen could tell at a glance that this should be some kind of front-end model of YNVGB. The reason is very simple. This thing has a thermal fusion mode. To put it simply, this thing is designed to address the shortcomings of traditional night vision goggles. Low-light night vision goggles allow soldiers to obtain a better depth of field, making it easier to observe non-infrared targets. They are suitable for traveling at night, but are not conducive to identifying the enemy. Thermal imaging can mark and identify targets very quickly, but has no depth of field at all. If you travel with thermal imaging on, people who have not received special training will get dizzy after 2 steps. In order to solve these 2 problems, the Americans made an attempt. They superimposed a thermal imager on the traditional low-light night vision to form a special thermal fusion imaging picture. It combines the functions of depth of field and target recognition. To put it simply, it can be said in one sentence: advertisement infrared outlines superimposed on low-light footage. Or to put it more intuitively, this thing can depict the human body. Chen Chen put the night vision goggles on his head and felt it, then nodded with satisfaction. In fact, the imaging effect of this thing is very average. After all, this is a technology that is several years old. It has just reached an awkward stage of development. It is better than the commonly used 4i night vision goggles, but it does not meet the standards of the later YNVGB. However, it has a special advantage that a 4i night vision device can never provide. That is, it can provide an unparalleled view through smoke. For the Dongfeng Corps, which is used to fighting in the smoke, this thing is simply a magical weapon. It must be the Americans who knew what we needed and sent it to us immediately. Thinking of this, Chen Chen said, "Take all the equipment away. Don't move the computers and monitors. Leave them here for the police to handle. There's not much here. Try to touch the body." Clear. Everyone answered immediately, and a few minutes later, the house was almost completely emptied, while the back bed of the pickup truck was filled to the brim. Chen Chen greeted Ga Yaozi and told him not to touch the equipment inside to avoid causing unnecessary trouble. The latter nodded to indicate that he understood, and then Chen Chen drove away. They returned to the top of the cliff, and at this time, Ping Chuan had completed the treatment of all the wounded. With the help of modern tools, he single-handedly completed a task that normally required multiple people. The condition of the wounded was very stable, and judging from his report, the prognosis was basically good. Bao Qi's hand is in serious condition. The bones are too broken. I don't have the conditions to replant a broken arm. I can first connect the blood vessels and keep the arm on my thigh, but the conditions for replanting a severed arm are only available in Jakarta. I need to fly there tonight. Please arrange a plane for me. I need a medical plane. After arriving, I need to assess the local medical level to see if it can support the operation. I suggest sending him north, if possible, or to Europe. But that's a matter for later. You need to deal with the plane first. Clear. Ping Chuan made the decision quickly and decisively, and with a sense of unquestionable authority. Chen Chen did not refute a word, but immediately handed the matter over to Shi Dakai, asking Shi Dakai to contact Bao Xiaomei to arrange a special medical plane. The cost of calling a medical plane is actually not as high as most people think. The cost of a long-distance intercontinental flight will not exceed $2 million at most, and the cost of a short flight from Sulawesi to Jakarta is not much higher. The only difficulty is how to find such an aircraft. and it just so happens that Bao Xiaomei is professional in this area. After determining the strategy, Chen Chen and Shi Dekai began to organize the evacuation of the wounded and prisoners, while Chen Chen led the team to collect the corpses of the MPRI members scattered everywhere. In fact, in the previous high-intensity conflict, neither side had time to deal with the bodies. When Chen Chen found the MPRI members lying on the roadside, there were even wild dogs that had begun to tentatively gnaw on their exposed faces. The wild dogs in Krino were as hungry as those in any other impoverished area. They did not know the value of the equipment on these people. To them, flesh and blood were just flesh and blood, and no one was superior to anyone else, nor did it have any meaning beyond protein and fat. Chen Chen shot away the wild dogs, gathered all the corpses together, and stripped them of all their equipment. And this time they finally had some new gains. For M249 paratrooper machine guns and a number of bullets can just make up for the lack of firepower of individual soldiers in the Dongfeng Corps. As many as 3 M82, A1 large caliber sniper rifles, and 1 XM109. Although it is also called a sniper rifle, Chen Chen actually always felt that it would be more reasonable to call this thing a sniper grenade. The 25mm caliber high explosive bomb is almost fatal to light vehicles. It can easily shoot down a hovering armed helicopter and is also very effective in damaging armored vehicles. Although it is indeed less powerful than the sniper grenades with stacked firepower in the north, it is completely sufficient. This thing was not used from beginning to end, but it was not because they had any concerns, but because this thing is used in conjunction with the vehicle-mounted heavy machine gun, and the gunman was directly stunned by Yangshu's cluster stun grenade. What a big leak. If this thing was brought to the cliff, the casualties of the Dongfeng Corps might be even higher. In addition to weapons and night vision goggles, the biggest gain from these corpses is a variety of advanced sights. Thermal imaging sights, red dot sights, holographic sights, mechanical side sights. Chen Chen collected a lot of them and immediately took apart a set to calibrate his own gunfire. At this moment, he finally felt that the gun had returned to its familiar state. When he held it, he also had a feeling of seeing an old friend again. Return with a full load. Chen Chen counted his equipment for the last time and threw all the unnecessary and useless things on the ground. Afterwards, the four drove 2 cars and prepared to return. But at this moment, many figures suddenly appeared on the cliff. Many unarmed figures. Chen Chen raised his gun vigilantly, and the figures began to retreat after seeing their guns, but did not turn around and leave. The two sides confronted each other for a few seconds, and Chen Chen suddenly realized that their purpose was actually the same as his. They had no hostility, they just wanted to pick up some scraps. Chen Chen decisively put down his gun and waved to the civilians opposite him, signaling them to do as they please. Soon, after their vehicle passed by, those people gathered around and began to strip the equipment from the bodies. Shoes, bloodstained clothes, iron military badges, belts, broken bulletproof vests. They wanted everything. There was a gleam of greed in their eyes. But Chen Chen suddenly felt that perhaps only this kind of greed could truly save this land. When Chen Chen returned to Qingshan Park, the medical plane called by Ping Chuan had arrived at La Boda Airport. Within these 2 hours, Ping Chuan had completed a simple operation, connecting Bao Qi's armed blood vessels with his abdominal blood vessels and completing a standard abdominal buried flap repair operation, saving Bao Qi's arm in the short term. This bought Bao Qi a lot of time, but whether his arm could be saved was not something Ping Chuan could decide. Therefore, after the handover with the medical plane, Ping Chuan decisively gave up continuing to accompany and provide care, and instead handed this work over to other medical staff arranged by Zhang Yang. As for himself, he had to continue to monitor the situation of the wounded in the Dongfeng Corps who did not need to be evacuated. These people have generally undergone emergency treatment, but in order to ensure the prognosis, Ping Chuan has to overturn all the original treatment measures and carry out more detailed treatment again. This process took nearly 8 hours, and during these 8 hours, Chen Chen truly witnessed Ping Chuan's vigorous energy and professional qualities. He quickly sorted out the priorities of all the wounded. Lin He, who Chen Chen originally thought had the lightest injuries, was brought to the front, and his calf wound was retreated and sutured, while the 2 members who seemed to be more seriously injured were placed behind Lin He. The other members who only had abrasions and penetrating injuries in non-core parts of the body were all handed over to other doctors in Qingshan Park Hospital for treatment. After his adrenaline level dropped, Chen Chen's wound began to hurt. He sat outside the emergency room with a grin on his face, but the problem was that the emergency room at the Qingshan campus was also full. The new round of Laboda bombings left nearly 30 people injured, 12 of whom were seriously injured and could not be saved. It was not until Ping Chuan finished taking care of the other wounded that he finally had time to help him suture his wound. What surprised Chen Chen was that in a non-wartime situation, Ping Chuan's technique was very delicate and gentle, and the wounds he sutured were also quite beautiful and smooth. After everything was done, Chen Chen subconsciously touched his face and asked, "Master Chuan, this is not a battlefield first aid method." Ping Chuan chuckled and returned to his casual state in daily environments and replied, "Of course, I graduated from a professional school after all. Besides, you have a pretty good face, you can't disfigure it, or else my daughter will blame me and it will be troublesome." Hearing this, Chen Chen couldn't help but roll his eyes and said, "Master Chuan, can you be more careful with your words? You can't make such jokes casually. Be careful or the organization will send someone to talk to you. If I need to talk, I'll just talk to you too. I won't discuss this with you anymore. Call her and let her know you're safe. No need to fight. I've already fought before." Chen Chen shook his head and answered decisively. Ping Chuan was stunned for a moment, frowned and asked, "Did something happen before?" Trouble? No trouble, just wait." After getting Chen Chen's confirmation, Ping Chuan didn't ask any more questions. He just nodded and walked towards the Qingshan hospital ward. He still had to continue dealing with the other wounded, while Chen Chen also had to make arrangements for the next task. The situation in Sulawesi is unprecedentedly chaotic, and the Dongfeng Corps is seriously understaffed, but the good news is that the new recruits sent by Old Pig are already on the way and will arrive in Laboda in a day. By that time, the elite combat power of the Dongfeng Corps will be replenished for the first time. In addition, Those who come this time are all northerners whose tactics Chen Chen is familiar with, so training and running in should not be too difficult. But before that, Chen Chen still needs to borrow the power of the security department to ensure the safety of the entire park. In the office of the Dongfeng Corps, Chen Chen met Wang Qi, who was literally dusty and exhausted. He stood up, took the initiative to step forward and shook Wang Qi's hand, and said gratefully, "Thanks to you this time. If there was no air support, we would really be in trouble this time." After hearing his words, Wang Qi did not take credit for it, but explained directly, "It's also our responsibility as arranged by the higher-ups. The machine gun was actually modified by your people. We really can't do this job. However, the situation this time is indeed very dangerous. They actually have an aerial electronic warfare platform. So, who are the people on the other side? SEALs?" Chen Chen sighed and replied, "You could say they are SEALs, they are all retired. The people on the other side are MPRI mercenaries. We had some conflicts with them before, and we have anticipated their actions this time. But we didn't expect that they would mobilize this level of equipment and personnel." MPRI. Wang Qi repeated it subconsciously, and then said thoughtfully, "Indeed, in this place, they are the only ones with such fighting power. But to be honest, I really didn't expect you guys to fight like this. With all-out electronic and intelligence suppression and no numerical advantage, you guys are still able to even the odds. This is really a bit too much. I'm really getting more and more curious about where you guys came from. Your style seems to be Lu Ti's, but the way you do things, forget it, this is not something I should ask." Wang Qi stopped talking in time and said, "You are suffering from a serious loss of personnel now. What are your plans for the future?" "That's what I want to talk to you about." Chen Chen pointed at the sofa and motioned Wang Qi to sit down. Then he said, "We actually have a mechanism for recruiting personnel, but it will take at least a month to form a sufficient scale. When I say a sufficient scale, I mean a scale that can accommodate at least 3 12-man teams and establish a complete rotation system for training, defense, and combat here. But the enemy can't wait that long, and we can't just sit there and wait to die. So, I want to borrow your strength. You want us to join the Dongfeng Corps?" Wang Qi asked thoughtfully. "No." Chen Chen shook his head decisively, and then replied, "I want you to form an air force for me." "Air force?" Wang Qi's eyes widened and he asked in disbelief, "Are you talking about a serious air force? Or do you just want air strike force?" "I just want air strike power." Chen Chen nodded slightly and explained, "I don't care how you organize yourself, how you arrange your personnel, or what kind of aircraft you use. I have only one request. When we fight on the ground, there must be 2 or more planes equipped with heavy machine guns in the air to provide us with cover. In fact, I was going to do this myself, but I found that this matter was a bit too troublesome for the Dongfeng Corps. It's hard to buy planes and find pilots, but this time you did a really good job. How about it? Do you want to consider it?" Wang Qi frowned slightly. In fact, the request made by Chen Chen was indeed very tempting. Establish a legal flying team. Normally, they don't need to do anything. If there is a mission, they just need to quickly modify the team's aircraft, replace them with weapons with suppressive power, and then fly over the enemy's head and shoot from a distance. There is no need to take the blame or assume any responsibility. What this flying team really needs to do is to provide a certain degree of convenience to the Dongfeng Corps. Advertisement at the same time, the safety of the flight team can be basically guaranteed. After all, in Indonesia, as long as you don't fly your plane directly into a military-restricted area and don't openly declare war on Indonesian official forces, the risk of being shot down is very small. What? You mean MPRI? Stop it. What about MPRI? After all, this is not the United States. No matter how crazy you free men are, you can't launch anti-aircraft missiles at my normal flying and legally registered aircraft, right? Thinking of this, Wang Qi also understood Chen Chen's intention. What he needs is a legal skin, and it just so happens that this skin is in his own hands, or rather, it is in the hands of Qingshan Group. It seems like it can be done. Wang Qi scratched his head subconsciously and asked, "How do we get a plane? Small planes are still very expensive. It is definitely illegal to modify weapons. We need to have connections with the local police and even the Air Traffic Control Bureau. We still have to be affiliated with Qingshan Group, and the decision can only be made by Mr. Zhang. Another point is, if we join the war, our identity will be affected. None of these are problems." Chen Chen said confidently, "Nonsense. I have done so much work for Xiaoyu since I came to Indonesia, and even exceeded the task requirements. If they can't even meet this requirement, then we should just not cooperate in the future. The front line is risking their lives, so you have to find a way to cover them in the rear. Moreover, having a flying team is actually very beneficial for the subsequent weapons transportation work. I had previously told Peng Shuqing that I wanted to buy planes, but there was no way to set up an airline. Now that this problem has been thrown to Qingshan Group to solve, it will be much easier. Maybe I can really run an air transport team in the future. By then, not only Indonesia, but also any place in the world he could fly there." After hearing Chen Chen's words and looking at the confident expression on his face, Wang Qi finally gritted his teeth and answered, "Then I'll go ask Mr. Zhang for his opinion. If he can do it, I think it should be okay on my end. Everyone is short of money, and everyone wants to make some extra money. As long as you don't gamble your life on the money, it's okay to make some money. But speaking of this, the question of profit, don't worry. We will only satisfy you and will never embarrass you." Chen Chen is more confident about this topic, because he knew that Dongfeng Group lacked everything now. There was a lack of trade routes, supply sources, markets, and local connections, but there was no lack of money. After negotiating with Wang Qi, Chen Chen immediately called Xiaoyu after sending him out of the office. The phone rang twice and then was picked up. Xiaoyu's voice on the other end was a little low, but the tone was relaxed. "I've been waiting for your call for a long time. Have you returned to Qingshan Park?" Xiaoyu asked. Chen Chen nodded subconsciously and replied, "I just dealt with the problem of the wounded. This time I really suffered a big loss. MPRI sent over only elite troops, and the equipment they used was the most advanced, but unfortunately, we couldn't use it at all. What's going on? Land warrior system. We found a CE4I command terminal device and destroyed it. That's fine. Don't touch anything this sensitive, or I won't be able to handle it. How are the injured? Are you injured too? I heard you're doing well. There was a hint of concern in Xiaoyu's words. It was obvious that she had been worried about this matter for a long time, but the previous tense situation did not allow her to ask such an insignificant question. And now, after entering the aftermath stage, she finally asked what she wanted to ask. The injured are basically stable. Bao Qi's arm was broken, and he was just sent to Jakarta. His arm may not be saved, but his life is saved. I'm fine. I was shot in the face, through the cheek. Luckily, the artery wasn't damaged. It's been stitched up, so it's not a big deal. That's good, Bao Qi. Do you need medical support? We'll see. Chuanyi will do an assessment. If Jakarta can't do it, I'm going to move him to the north. You have to find a way to give me the green light no matter what. No problem. The little fish answered without hesitation. If Indonesia can't do it, go directly to Hong Kong. I will arrange for experts to go there. Okay, try to get one from the 6th hospital. But I will try my best to transfer you to Hospital 89. After getting Xiaoyu's promise, Chen Chen finally felt relieved. In fact, contrary to most people's impression of medical conditions in the north, in the field of limb replantation, the technology in the north is among the best in the world. Among them, the ones with the most advanced technology are probably the 6th hospital and the 89th hospital. Since Xiaoyu said that she would try her best to transfer experts from the 89th hospital, it means that she has indeed met all the conditions in terms of medical insurance. From this point of view, they are quite satisfied with their actions this time. Therefore, Chen Chen no longer hesitated, but struck while the iron was hot and said, "That's no problem. But there is one more thing. I plan to set up a flying team and need your support. But I'll find a way. How many do you want? If possible, I would like 3, preferably both fixed wing and helicopter." This time, Chen Chen rarely asked for too much. Xiaoyu did not respond with, "I'll build you an aircraft carrier," and just remained silent for a few seconds before replying. "This matter needs to be handled by Qingshan Group. You communicate directly with Zhang Yang. We will not get involved. Your first commission will arrive soon, and it should be enough for you to spend." Clear. Chen Chen did not ask any further questions because everything was already implied. After a brief chat, and confirming that there was nothing more to communicate or report, Chen Chen planned to hang up the phone. At this moment, Xiaoyu on the other side suddenly said, "Your peace card is still here with me. It seems to be quite useful. Remember to pick it up when you come back." By the next day, Chen Chen had basically finished sorting out all the things on hand. Security was rearranged. In order to fill the shortage of staff, Chen Chen communicated with Ganawin and Argus and asked them to directly dispatch a police team of 100 people to the factory area. If something unexpected really happened, Chen Chen certainly couldn't expect these police officers to play any role. But as long as they are here, they can make the enemy afraid to act rashly and at least delay them for a while. Once the 6-man support team arrives, safety will be restored to a basic level. Chen Chen was almost looking forward to the arrival of the newcomer, but before the newcomer arrived, he had to continue to deal with the problems of the old man. The remains of the cricket and fighting cock are still in the park of Qingshan Group. In the current chaotic situation, it is extremely difficult to transport the bodies. In addition, the weather in Indonesia is extremely hot, and there are no conditions for cremation near Laboda. This is a very realistic problem. Therefore, after communicating with other members and the families of the two, Chen Chen finally decided to bury them on the spot on the barren hill near the Qingshan Park. Zhang Yang understood this idea of resting in peace very well, so he made special arrangements and marked out an area to be used as a cemetery. But Chen Chen felt that this statement was too unlucky and ultimately did not adopt it. He simply took other members of the Dongfeng group who were still able to move up the mountain and dug 2 deep graves for the 2 people in the open space that Zhang Yang promised would not be affected by mining work. Afterwards, the bodies of the 2 were placed in coffins that were purchased temporarily and buried in the tomb. The entire funeral went on quite peacefully, even to the point of being boring. There were no sad cries, no flowers, no Swana music and firecrackers, and of course there would be no farewell gunshots. Everyone just took turns to throw the 2 people's personal belongings into the grave one by one, and then piled up the grave high with a shovelful. Sure Dakai shoveled the last handful of soil. After putting down the shovel, he opened a pack of cigarettes and distributed them to everyone, lighting them up and sticking them in front of the simple tombstone. I have to say he was still in a somewhat low mood. It's not that the Dongfeng Corps has never suffered casualties. It can even be said that casualties in a mercenary group are extremely normal. You can't expect your team to fight to the end, with the enemies falling like grass, while you yourself will be as indomitable as a god of war. Death is the norm, and death is what always accompanies mercenaries. Sure Dakai was well aware of this, but it did not prevent him from feeling sorry for the death of the cricket and the fighting cock. If he doesn't even have such a regretful feeling, then he is probably not worthy of being the future commander of this corps, and the Dongfeng Corps will not be able to continue to grow and develop. Seeing his expression, Chen Chen beside him sighed and said, "They were not there when we played against the Shadow Corps coaching staff before, and since then they have been talking about having a match with the SEALs. I told them that this is not a good idea. You can always think about going head-on with people who are stronger than you. You should think about how to bully people who are weaker than you for the rest of your life." They should have listened, but unfortunately, things happen when you don't want them to happen. To some extent, this can be regarded as the tree wanting to be still, but the wind does not stop. We are all helpless. But after all, their deaths were not in vain. 12 people defeated 34 people from MPRI, even though their equipment was completely suppressed. This record is impressive no matter where you look. If there really is a hell, then they can give the little ghosts their good opportunity to learn more before they are reincarnated. Hearing Chen Chen's words, Sure Dakai nodded slightly, but did not answer immediately. After a long while, he finally spoke. "The person is gone. Actually, it is useless to say anything. We need stronger protection, stronger firepower, and stronger technology. In this battle, we actually still have a lot of areas that can be optimized. The lack of projectile firepower meant we couldn't suppress them from behind the bunkers. The lack of observation meant we couldn't build our own ODA. The lack of electronic countermeasures meant even our communications were completely suppressed. If these things can be done, if they can do that, then we shouldn't be called the Dongfeng Corps anymore. We should just change our name to the Navy SEALs. Chen Chen interrupted Shirdaka and continued. People will eventually die. Who doesn't have this awareness if they can become a mercenary? In Pubei, a large number of mercenaries die in battle every day for various inexplicable reasons. If they had not joined the Dongfeng Corps, even if the Lion Corps could continue to exist, the strongest enemy they could challenge in their lifetime would probably be the Burmese Army's Border Defense Brigade. They have seen the world, and from that perspective, we don't need to, and we don't have the right to, feel sorry for them. Shirdaka smiled bitterly and shook his head, and replied, this is just self-consolation. If you can live, who wants to die? That's true. Chen Chen patted the dirt off his body, and after a few seconds of silence, he suddenly spoke again. I don't know what the crickets and fighting cocks think, but for me, I don't really care. It doesn't matter? Why? Hearing his words, Shirdaka asked in confusion. Advertisement, because you said it yourself? We want to be cleaners, and we also want to sell brooms. I want to clean up some things and change things that many people have failed to change. To put it bluntly, if this battle was fought in Pubei, we definitely wouldn't have time to mourn for them. According to our style, if it was in Pubei now, everyone would have driven tanks to kill other people's families. The reason you feel depressed is actually because you think their deaths are meaningless, right? Shirdaka nodded slowly and replied, indeed. I always feel like they didn't originally belong here, and were dragged here by us. But it's not. Chen Chen interrupted Shirdaka and said, crickets and fighting cocks are both pure mercenaries, but you shouldn't take them too lightly. They may not have too many lofty ideals, but they definitely want something better. Of course, they also want those better things to last for a long time. So, they have to make this choice because it is the only way. Pubei's problems cannot be solved in Pubei alone. If we don't take over Indonesia, how can we support what we want to do with a market like Pubei? If we can't do what we do, how can the things that want to last long last? Making money? What's the point of making money? If Pubei's situation cannot be changed, no matter how much wealth you have, it will only be a flash in the pan. Only when you are strong enough to make stronger people willing to talk to you about ideals can you talk to most people about money. So in terms of meaning, there is actually no difference between dying here and dying in Pubei. Hearing this, Linny nodded thoughtfully, and then interrupted. Pubei's ceiling is too thick and Pubei's firepower is insufficient, so we have to get stronger firepower from other places. For people like us in Pubei, this is the fact. Very fitting. Chen Chen looked at Lin He approvingly, and at this time Shirdaka had also suddenly come out of his depressed mood. He looked at the two short graves again and nodded solemnly. I see. That's true. The purpose of all of us has never changed. Those who want to make money can make money, and those who want to do things can do things. It's just that the process may be a little longer, and it just opens up a new battlefield. But it doesn't matter. There are green mountains everywhere in life. For them, or for us in the future, even if they die, they will be buried in the green mountains. Shirdaka paused for a few seconds, then suddenly smiled and said, of course, I still hope that what is buried under the green mountain in the future is the remains of the enemy. Chen Chen patted Shirdaka on the shoulder and replied, it's good to be able to figure it out. One day in the future, you will be the commander-in-chief of this corps. There are many things that should be thought through in advance. I see. Shirdaka nodded again, and the group bid farewell to the graves of the cricket and the fighting cock. Shirdaka regained his energy and began to seriously discuss with Chen Chen the issues of optimizing subsequent equipment, tactics, and training direction. Lin He, on the other hand, was rather silent along the way, as if he had something on his mind. Chen Chen noticed the situation and asked, what are you thinking about? Lin He smiled sheepishly and replied, no, it's nothing important. I just had an idea. That's right, maybe the whole world is just a huge Pubei. The first commission that Xiaoyu promised did arrive quickly, a total of 20 million US dollars, all of which was deposited into Dongfeng Group's account. This was their first income since arriving in Indonesia. Although it didn't seem like much, the speed at which they made money was actually quite astonishing. Because up to now, they have actually only been in Indonesia for 2 weeks. Earning 20 million US dollars in 2 weeks is something that other mercenary groups would not even dare to think about. Only with a force of MPRI's level could the cost of an operation reach over tens of millions of US dollars. I have to say that the Dongfeng Corps is really very cost-effective. After paying various pensions, there was still 12 million US dollars left out of the 20 million US dollars. Naturally, Chen Chen invested this money in the next equipment procurement plan. Or to put it more bluntly, the money will be used to purchase the aircraft needed by the flying squadron. Chen Chen really wanted to continue getting the free stuff, but he also knew that the significantly excessive commission Xiaoyu gave him was essentially asking him to handle the plane issue himself. Greed is insatiable. He couldn't possibly ask for things after taking the money, so he had to do it himself and look for a suitable plane. However, this search process was a bit unfamiliar to Chen Chen. When he was used to buying things that were not presentable and could not be seen, Zhang Yang actually arranged for a customer manager of a so-called private flight solution company to come to La Boda for him. With complete information and absolutely legal procedures, he gave Chen Chen a strange sales pitch. Walking into Zhang Yang's office and looking at the fawning expression on the face of the Chinese account manager opposite him, Chen Chen suddenly felt extremely disconnected. He was obviously not used to his role as the boss and even seemed a little uneasy. After all, the account manager was a seasoned businessman, and he could tell Chen Chen's mood at a glance and instantly formed a judgment in his mind that, in his opinion, the person sitting opposite him was probably a local boss who made a fortune from mining and wanted to buy some airplanes to show off, but he had never experienced such an occasion, so he seemed nervous. So, the account manager put aside his professional and luxury style, immediately put on a carefree smile, stood up and walked in front of Chen Chen, took the initiative to extend his hand, and said, Brother Chen, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Hurry up and sit down. Everything is ready for you. What a pity. The conditions here are so poor. I originally wanted to bring 2 female public relations staff with me, but it's really inconvenient. Oh, you don't know there have been gunshots and cannons these days, which has really worried us. I heard that the fight in Krino was even more brutal. They killed more than 30 Americans. Oh, that's so satisfying. Hey, Brother Chen, you haven't watched the news yet, have you? Hearing this, Chen Chen coughed and replied, I saw it. I was saying, how could you not watch the news for such a big thing? Look at me. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Yubin. I'm a real northerner, not an overseas Chinese. This is my business card. Please keep it. If you have any questions in the future, just come to me. Whether you want to buy or rent a plane, I can handle it for you in one stop. That's good. Chen Chen nodded calmly and pointed to the sofa to indicate that they should sit down and talk. Yubin immediately followed and did not forget to personally pour Chen Chen a cup of tea that he had prepared. After a brief chat, Chen Chen brought the topic to the point. Yubin on the opposite side followed suit and said, Brother Chen, we are all family. I won't hide anything from you. Although our company claims to sell solutions, in essence we still sell aircraft and services. You know, buying an airplane is different from buying a car. You might buy a car to look at it, but when you buy an airplane, you definitely want to drive it. So, before we start talking, I have to ask you, what do you need from the plane? Hearing his words, Chen Chen couldn't help but feel a little troubled. To be honest, if he could choose randomly, he would like the bigger the plane, the better. Considering the situation in Indonesia, it would be best to get the Russian B-200, modify it, add a few machine guns, and two 30mm to A-42 cannons. If that is not enough, add two Russian-made 57 cannons. If that is still not enough, just add the Nona rifle mortar. In short, the bigger the caliber, the more justice, the more powerful the firepower, the more peaceful, and a proper aerial gunship must be used to protect the skies of Sulawesi. Unfortunately, this idea can only be thought about. It's not because Chen Chen can't afford the B-200. After all, this thing is only more than 20 million US dollars. Chen Chen can buy it with his own pocket money if he grits his teeth. It's not because he can't get those weapon systems or doesn't know how to modify them. If Indonesia cannot modify it, the worst that can happen is that it will be taken to Africa for modification. South Africa is very good at modifying this thing. As long as you give them money, they will dare to move up to 155mm guns, let alone 120mm rifle guns. The main reason is that even if this thing is made, it actually cannot fly. As a civilian aircraft, this thing is so big, you have to apply for a flight route. As a military aircraft, you don't have an official platform, anyone can shoot you down. Therefore, Chen Chen can only choose some small and medium-sized amphibious multi-purpose aircraft, but the range is too wide, and he really doesn't know how to choose. Seeing his embarrassed expression, Yubin opposite him looked like he knew what was going on, and said, You don't understand airplanes, do you? It's okay. Just say whatever you want. Just follow your instinct. We sell solutions. As long as you make a request, we will definitely meet it. Specifically, for example, how many people can it seat, how far can it fly, and whether there are any special requirements for comfort. How about it? Do you have any ideas? Chen Chen hesitated for a moment and finally answered. I need a seaplane with a maximum takeoff weight of about 20 tons and a maximum load capacity of at least 5 tons. At the same time, the cruising speed should be faster, at least 350 kilometers per hour. Also, the climb rate must be high and the maneuverability must be good. Most importantly, it has to have the potential for modification. Yubin opened his mouth in surprise, not knowing what to say for a moment. Wow, where did this local boss come from? You just learned a few terms and put them on display? Brother, what is climb rate and maneuverability? Do you know what these things mean? Even if you know as a boss, do you need these indicators when buying an airplane? Shouldn't you choose a plane that is as comfortable as possible and has as large a passenger capacity as possible? Well, the requirement of modification potential is quite common. After all, from the businesses I've handled, most bosses would modify their planes to make them look fancy. Not to mention sofas and living rooms, it is also common to put beds on the plane. Even the most outrageous bosses directly converted their planes into an entertainment room in the hope of experiencing the feeling of being a flying person. Could this boss be the same type? He even asked for a load capacity? What? He was just firing guns as soon as he flew into the sky? He looks so young, maybe he's a little too energetic. But the customer is God. Since you said so, let's just talk about it. So he answered, Understood. I've taken note of your request. According to your requirements, I remember there are several seaplanes that can meet your requirements. But the number is very small because, as you know, the seaplane track is mainly dominated by small aircraft. If you require a load of more than 5 tons, it will be very difficult to do. If it's the most suitable, there should only be 2 options. One is a Dominion 228 made in Germany, and the other is a CL 415 made in Canada. Both aircraft are available for purchase and can be in place in a short period of time if you want them. But I must remind you that the comfort of the aircraft selected according to this standard will be quite poor. I want to know, do you have any hard requirements for these parameters? Hard requirements? Of course. I bought the plane to modify it. And it's not just about mounting a heavy machine gun on it as before, but I want to install a modular weapon system. Advertisement in this case. The load capacity of an aircraft becomes particularly important. If it doesn't even have a load capacity of 5 tons, should I change it to a hammer? A large caliber machine gun, and its ammunition weigh more than half a ton. My plane has already flown up, so it can't be that there is only a machine gun and no machine gun, right? Add to that the messy control systems and equipment, and the average load of a machine gun is at least 1 ton, and a machine gun is half a ton. 3 heavy machine guns, 1 machine cannon, plus ammunition and personnel, weigh about 5 tons. Only when this standard is met will it be meaningful for Chen Chen to purchase. So, this is really a hard requirement. Thinking of this, Chen Chen nodded seriously. A helpless look flashed across Yu Bin's face. He looked at Zhang Yang, who was listening beside him. The latter's application had not changed at all. Wow, he's still wearing a pair of pants? Then there is no room for negotiation. After a few seconds of silence, he asked, Are you planning to use these planes for entertainment? If you're going for entertainment, you might as well consider more private jets instead of just seaplanes. What I want is a seaplane. Chen Chen interrupted Yu Bin without hesitation. This was also a bottom line. Due to the complexity of the mission, it is impossible for him to guarantee that the plane will have the opportunity to land at a fixed airport every time after taking off. So considering the vast water conditions near Sulawesi, seaplane is the best choice. Even in an emergency, the aircraft can land in an inland river, which is the best option from the perspective of concealment and safety. Then it can only be the two I mentioned. Yubin nodded and continued to ask, are there any requirements for comfort modifications? Like seats, doors, living room, washing equipment, living room, cleaning unit? Chen Chen was a little confused. Is there a way to change this on an airplane? Why the hell would I need this? All the seats have to be removed, and the cabin doors have to be removed as well. Chen Chen replied. What? Yubin was stunned. No, you're planning on doing an aerial tour, right? Something doesn't seem right. It seems that I guessed wrong from the beginning. Yes, not only do we need to remove the doors, but we also need to modify the aircraft structure. I mean, it'd be best if it could be as light as possible, so we can refit it with new equipment later. For example, the one you're showing me now, the CL-415, is this a firefighting aircraft? I think this is quite suitable. There's actually a lot of space for the main water tank, but I don't need this thing. Before delivery, you have to help me remove the water tank. I want to put something else in it. Understood. Yubin suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart, but out of professionalism, he did not continue to ask, but instead asked, I heard that you want to purchase a total of 3 aircraft this time. What about the other 2? Do you want a CL-415 as well? Chen Chen shook his head and replied, no. It would be nice if the other 2 were small planes, and since they were all bought in Canada, I'll take the DC-3. Similarly, I have only one modification requirement. I just want a platform that can fly. I don't want anything else that is not necessary. That good. Hearing Chen Chen's words, Yubin couldn't help but shudder. He suddenly remembered the security team and training that he saw when he entered the park and the weapons in their hands. At this moment, his prejudice against this local tycoon disappeared and was replaced by a deep fear. My mom. What he really wants to buy is not his amphibious fighter, right? Yes, this is the only reasonable explanation. What the hell is an aerial artillery room? What he wants is a real aerial artillery room. What is the purpose of removing the hatch? Without a doubt, it is to mount a machine gun. Why is the water tank removed? Maybe it's a hanging bomb. As for any structural modification, I'm afraid they will have to install bulletproof armor on it. Yubin's body began to tremble involuntarily. To be honest, after working in this business for so many years, he had served all kinds of clients. But this is my first time doing such an exciting business. Damn, I'm just a private jet seller, not an arms dealer. But then again, I don't sell arms either. I sell airplanes, and it's none of my business what you change them into. Thinking of this, Yubin suddenly understood. He exhaled lightly and said, I understand, Mr. Chen. I fully understand your request. We will pre-modify the aircraft according to your request. This process may take some time, about 1 to 2 weeks to be specific. Once everything is done, we will deliver the aircraft according to the formal procedures. As for your subsequent specific use, we will no longer be involved. Of course, for subsequent maintenance and repair work, well, we can only repair the original aircraft. No problem. Chen Chen stood up and extended his hand to Yubin. Then let's have a happy cooperation. I hope you can send my plane over soon. Don't worry, I promise to do it as fast as possible.